This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Spotcast, Season 5, Episode 5. My name is Tim Mitchell. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kula in Mississauga, Ontario.
Stupid Blue Jays.
And we also have Jaime Lopez. And we also have Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington. The victorious Jaime Lopez Jr., that is.
How's it going?
Well, not so good. Well, it's I guess baseball season's over, eh, John?
Thank goodness. I couldn't take one more minute. You know, anytime they use the term historic to describe how your team leaves an event, it's probably not a good day.
It was a historic trouncing.
It was the single largest comeback in postseason history, which is not really something you want to be associated with when the Mariners do this to your beloved hometown Blue Jays. It's not a moment you want to participate in very much. So congratulations, Jaime. I hope you enjoyed the history.
Are they having T-shirts and posters made, or what?
I don't know if it's going to end up being like the 28-3 thing that goes on for Atlanta Falcons fans who famously lost to the New England Patriots despite leading 28-3. I forget where it was in the game, but if you were leading at any point during the game, you would think that you would probably have that well in hand. And spoilers, they lost. So I can understand that. Here, Mariners fans were just super happy to be in the playoffs. So we were happy with the outcome. We're less happy with where we sit now, where the Astros, are just finding ways to beat the Mariners. They're a tough team. We can put up runs. They can put up more is how it's boiled down to it. So, there's still hypothetically potentially 3 games left, but it's not looking too good. We might get eliminated. So we're sitting here on Friday. We might get eliminated tomorrow in a clean sweep, but not without putting up a Rocky Balboa style, toe to toe with the champ sort of thing. So
I'm not sure. Is he rubbing it in, John?
No, this is not rubbing it in. This is being very, very practical and pragmatic around it. That the Mariners show that they're a very talented team. The Blue Jays are obviously a very talented team. The stuff just went the right way. Look, if you had told me, hey, guess what? Like the turning point in the game is this complete fluke collision in the outfield, I would be like, you're crazy. There's no way it's coming down to that. Like that's a weird thing to have happen. So that's why they play the games, man. That's why they play the games. Nobody knows what the heck's going to go on.
Yep. Well, and ideally, that's why you play a multiple game series, because that eliminates the randomness and focuses on theoretically the best team over a certain amount of time wins. But at a best 2 out of 3, not really like that. You kind of just one bad bounce and you're toast. And then that's what happened. They were outplaying Seattle until they weren't, and then they lost. But
I'll say in that game, I was like, man, Robbie Ray is like the deepest undercover double agent I've ever seen to like leave a team so he could get them into the playoffs just to secretly tank against his home team, his previous team. I was very unhappy for most of that game until it, turned out to be a victory. So it was wild, man. It was wild.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, I think what you're hoping for in those series, especially because, realistically, both our teams are wildcard teams. They weren't the favorites going in. I think what you hope for is, make a good showing. And unfortunately, that's where my team kind of fell short. But again, you should be really proud of the Mariners. Like they play their butts off. Like it's it's good. I was kind of hoping that they would give Houston a run for their money, because I'm in the anyone but New York and Houston camp. Can't stand the Yankees after my entire lifetime of them being in the same division as the Blue Jays, and Houston are cheaters. So there's that. But yeah, it's unfortunate. But what are you going to do?
I don't know. Let's talk about something we can control. That's science fiction.
There you go. We can totally control that.
All right. Cool. So we'll start off. We don't have much fact check this week, so we'll just dive into the headlines. I'm thinking Jonathan up first. Did you post this link from Star Trek News at NYC? Yeah,
it was kind of everything, right? So it was sort of covered off what you had flagged in there and everything else. But yeah, last weekend was the New York Comic Con, and as part of New York Comic Con, there was a bunch of Star Trek news that came out of that. We got another trailer for Picard, which Tim will talk about in a second, and we also got a little bit of casting news and a few other little tidbits. So I'll rattle them through here, and you guys can let me know what you think. So some new cast members for the upcoming season 5 of Discovery. So we got Callum Keith Rennie, Elias Tufexis, and Eve Harlow joining the cast. Interesting to get a little bit of new blood mixed in there. We got Ronnie Cox coming back as Edward Jellicoe in Star Trek Prodigy. That was exceedingly random. Interesting. Of course, he was in famously the Captain Jellicoe, who replaced Captain Picard for a couple episodes as Captain of the Enterprise. And we got 3 new characters for the final season of Star Trek Picard, including a little legacy. So we got Amanda Plummer, of course, the great, talented Amanda Plummer. And then Micah Burton and Ashley Sharp Chestnut are coming on as Geordie LaForge's daughter. Micah, of course, being really LeVar Burton's daughter. So that's kind of cool. And that was sort of the big stuff that came out of New York Comic Con. What do you guys think of all this?
Yeah, it was interesting in the trailer when he sort of, Picard says, get us out of here, LaForge, and she answers saying, right away, Captain, kind of thing. Even though like a split second before that you had seen Geordie LaForge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to see the old, but this is sort of, it's funny because this reminds me of the later original series cast, when they were pretty much geriatric, not that these guys are geriatric per se, but them coming back to sort of reprise their roles, because in reality they would have all gone off to desk jobs and admiralties and all that kind of stuff.
And retirement, like realistically, I get that you probably live a lot longer, so you're probably not going to retire until you're in your who knows what 80s, 90s, 100s. But Patrick Stewart is in his 80s. It's funny because people have made that comparison. Well, it's kind of like those last few Star Trek movies where they were starting to show their age a little bit. If you step back from it and you realize that Patrick Stewart is older than any of those actors were at any point in any of those movies, he's just wearing it well. It's pretty funny to sort of realize, this is one of the oldest actors we've ever had in these kind of things.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, like, how old is he compared to, say, like the original series cast? Is he, because Shatner's up there too, right?
Shatner's in his 90s.
Oh, he's in 90s. Okay, right. What about like Sulu?
I don't know.
Spoilers on Sulu.
We'd have to look it up.
Do we have a Lower Deck link here somewhere? Wasn't there a Lower Deck trailer?
George Takei is 85.
85. Okay, and how old is Stewart? So they're in the same age range, is what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah, for sure. Patrick Stewart is 82.
Yeah, are we? Did we not see a Lower Deck? I guess is it next week's Lower Deck that I'm thinking of?
With George Takei?
Where we have another crossover? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, Takei was in this week's episode, right?
Oh, this week. Okay, yeah, okay, we'll talk about that later.
But I mean, there's a difference between an acting performance and a voice performance, I think. I don't mean to diminish one or the other. I just think they're different levels of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's involvement. Yeah, exactly. I see what you're saying. Right. Yeah, it's like the chicken and the old story of the chicken and the pig when it comes to breakfast. The chicken's involved.
Pig is committed. Yeah, exactly. And William Shatner's 91.
91. Okay, cool. So Jaime, what did you think about these 2 trailers?
I thought it was pretty...
3 trailers.
Pretty neat to see this stuff. I think it's pretty exciting to see everything that's hypothetically going to be in Star Trek Picard Season 3. The disco stuff was a little too light on details to sort of figure out what's going on there. That crew tends to get into large galaxy ending kind of thing, so that's kind of what I would have expected anyways. So the trailer didn't really fill me in on anything more related to that. So I feel like the Picard one was one I was a little bit more interested in because it showed a whole lot more of what's apparently going on.
Plus, we know it's the final season too, right?
Yeah, it's got that sort of extra angle to it.
So here's a question. So this series already has the ignominious distinction of being the final death of Data, which is, theoretically he was killed off in Nemesis, but here we get sort of the final nail in the coffin for the end of Picard Season 1. do you think they have the stones to kill any more people off from the original cast?
Don't know. Well, wait a minute. So that was Lore we saw in the trailer, right? Yeah. So maybe they have to deal with him. It's hard to say.
Bring back the crystalline entity. Bring back the crystalline entity.
Yeah. Maybe Kess will come back.
Yeah, it occurred to me as I was looking at these faces, and of course, they're going to put them all in jeopardy. But I was thinking, well, it's kind of hard to already have like and they all lived happily ever after ending, given that they've already killed Data, who was such a seminal part of the show. But yeah, I wonder if any of these characters or actors or they want these characters to go out in a blaze of glory. I mean, Han Solo, famously, Harrison Ford wanted Han Solo to die in Return of the Jedi, didn't get it, and then said, I'll come back and do this one last movie for a huge paycheck, and if you promise to kill him and I never have to come back, and then still came back as a, I don't know what, ghost? Vision?
Memory? Yeah.
So...
Vision, memory, yeah.
Yeah.
Really bad Leia clone? I don't know.
Yeah. Tell me again how good that movie is.
You're just, whatever. Jaw Jerpings. Alrighty.
All right. Unfortunately, some sad news. Just this afternoon, we got news that Robbie Coltrane passed away at the age of 72. Of course, best known in sort of the genre circles for being the actor who played Hagrid in all the Harry Potter movies. It's probably his biggest claim to fame globally. Of course, in the UK, he's well known for the TV show, the TV detective show Cracker, and of course, he was in a couple of James Bond movies. He's been an actor for a long, long time. Personally, I loved him in there's a movie he did with Eric Idle years ago called Nuns on the Run, which he's very, very, very funny in.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, where he's like, sort of a lapsed Catholic. They go and they hide out in a convent after they steal some money, and it's just a farce, but it's funny. And
which Whoopi Goldberg stole later.
Well,
right?
Yeah, same idea, right? It's go hide out in a convent. But yeah, it's it's just another blow in this sort of generation, and we just keep losing talented actors. I mean, his influence is obviously huge, but obviously outpourings from fellow stars, Emma Watson and Daniel Radcliffe and all these people weighing in, J.K. Rowling, and right up to the first Minister of Scotland was commenting on social media. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a pretty huge loss and disappointing. But yeah, I mean, what a body of work and what a legacy this guy leaves. And his portrayal of Hagrid, I believe all things come around again. I'm positive that somewhere down the road they'll make more Harry Potter movies or they'll remake the originals or whatever. But for our generation, for the generation younger than us, and for probably a long stretch of time, he's going to be Hagrid, which is an indelible character.
Yeah, it's same with Alec Rickman as Snape. Right? Sure. They're going to be not much you can't really replace them with other people, right? Yeah, I mean, and again, of course you can. Later in the news and notes, we'll talk about how you can replace people who die. But yeah, I mean, they are really unforgettable in those roles. They really made them their own, and it's hard to imagine anyone else being Snape. It's hard to imagine anyone else being Hagrid. But it'll happen eventually. Everything comes around. Well, when J.K. Rowling sells the rights to Disney, all bets are off, right?
Yes. Way to go. We also got, as part of New York Comic Con, our first trailer for the Super Mario movie. Now, this trailer looks fantastic. It looks like, a little more polished version of some of the cutscenes that we see in the game. It's very sort of quirky and funny and epic, and the whole thing looks fine. But that's not what people are focusing on, because, of course, they're not going to focus on that. Everyone's focusing on Chris Pratt. And Jaime, I know you've definitely got some information here, but then I'm sure you've got some opinions too.
Yeah, before we go into those, because there's sort of two main things that the internet has sort of keyed in on related to the Mario character. Before we get into that, there is, I think, a pretty good consensus that people liked Bowser, portrayed by Jack Black. Get to hear his voice. It doesn't sound like just Jack Black, so people were pretty happy with that. There's the 500 milliseconds tops of Charlie Day as Luigi. People were pretty happy with that. It seemed like it was in line with the character. And Keegan-Michael Key as Toad, people were pretty happy with that too. No complaints. So it really does come down to the initial belief, and still lots of back and forth stuff on the internet about, oh my gosh, Chris Pratt is basically just Chris Pratt. Doesn't sound at all like a plumber from Brooklyn, New York.
By the same token, he doesn't sound like Chris Pratt. He just sounded like a guy doing a Mario voice. But I guess the real question is, are the trolls on the internet, are they the target market, or are the next generation of kids the target market?
It's one of those things where when I first watched it, it's like a Rorschach test, right? It's like, do you see a butterfly in this ink blot kind of test, where I admit that when I watched the trailer, I was like, there's only like 2 lines from Mario, right? It's like something like, what is this place? And Mushroom Kingdom, here we come, right? It's very minimal. So from that, and the first time I watched the video, I was like, oh, okay, it just basically sounds like Chris Pratt. I didn't really think much of it because it wasn't that much of a speaking role for the trailer cut. People went off on the internet, said, oh my God, it's just Chris Pratt. Like, maybe he was just sitting on the toilet calling into a phone, which is probably the funniest one I saw. And then other people who were defending say, no, I think there's like a slight Brooklyn accent. Maybe it's not great, but there is one. And somebody went to the effort of animating Linda Belcher from Bob's Burgers with the same exact audio. I'm like, yeah, I hear it more now. It sounds even more Brooklyn. Isn't that weird? The same audio with a slightly different visual sounds very different to my ears. And now I cannot hear anything but the Brooklyn accent. I don't know. These things we talk about on the internet, man. That was number one of the controversies. The other one came out a little bit earlier from before the trailer, and that was with the release of the poster. And people were like, Mario has no butt. That is so weird. Why is it completely flat? Like, nobody expected him to have like cakes back there. Nobody had like a dump truck back there, but it was a little weird that it was just like completely flat. Like he has no gluteus maximus at all. Those were the 2 subjects they're swirling on the internet related to this kids movie for Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, and they've been merciless too. Like, people are taking this like it is, we're talking about the war in Ukraine. Like, people are really invested in this. Like, this is not that serious, but man, people are really invested in these things.
Yeah. I think it could be a good movie. Certainly, the phone lines are open if Nintendo ever wants to pay, or anybody out there, any corporation that can afford my $10,000 an hour consulting services, where I can see what you've got and tell you, hey, here's a bad idea, maybe you should change this part. I probably would have said, hey, you should make sure the main character talks not at all, or make sure he talks a lot, because it's going to be a big deal. And they chose an uncomfortable, middle ground that made everybody sort of thing.
Doesn't Mario in the game have sort of a really bad Italian accent?
Yeah, there was is it Chris Martinet, I think is his name? Charles Martinet who did it. But that's different to have the woohoo kind of thing when he's kind of just running around and jumping, or like, it's a me, Mario, from like the intro. And people said, imagine if you heard that the entire 90 minutes. It would be annoying. Just like, people are like, well, what about the Toads? It's like, hello. I can't even do the weird high-pitched voice that they do for the Toads in the game. Like, it'd be annoying to have that for 90 minutes. So I can understand some change. Whether they made the right changes, and is there what are people calling it, like stunt casting or celebrity washing? The most negative term I saw about, like, you choose Chris Pratt because that name gets you, it gets you onto Jimmy Fallon, and it gets the regular mainstream media talking about you. Like, oh, I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess Kevin Hart was busy, right?
He's doing every other animated product right now. I think the thing, even, my sons are in the demographic for growing up with Mario and modern Mario. But, even my youngest son was sort of saying, Charles Martinet's still alive, right? Like, it's not like they couldn't, have found a way to say, listen, we love you and your voice. You're a big part of the franchise. Let's just take it like down 2 notches for the animated picture. But yeah, they completely did what movies do now, where it's like, let's cast a bunch of celebrities and try and piggyback off their fame, right? But it's so unnecessary. Mm-hmm. Make a good movie. Make a good movie. I don't care who's doing the voices as long as the voices are done well. I mean, some of the most memorable movie voices over the past couple of decades have been ostensibly nobody famous. Doug the dog was one of the guys who works at Pixar. The voice of Edna Mole in The Incredibles was I think it's Brad Bird himself just doing a funny voice because they needed something to fill in the lines, and everyone decided he was just great and kept it there. Like, you don't need famous, what you need is good.
True. Yeah, but that's if it's a role that, like, I mean, Incredibles was like starting from scratch, right? And Doug the dog in Up was starting from scratch. They did actually have Edward Asner, right?
Sure.
So,
but again, not every role, right?
They had a name in that one. No, but the key role, right? Or 2 key roles. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, like, because I mean, the way that Hollywood works is that, stars attach themselves to these films. Who knows? Chris Pratt might have attached himself to the film earlier because he wants something for his kids to be able to watch, right? I mean, they can't really, maybe they're too young to run and watch him defeat dinosaurs for, 3 movies in a row, right? So, or the Marvel stuff as Star-Lord, right? So, I mean, like who is it? Antonio Banderas, attached himself to Spy Kids because for the same reason he wanted something for his kids to be able to watch, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, who knows?
It's just
don't know the motivations.
Weird, and I know I keep coming back to this as if it was a seminal moment in film history, but the standard was kind of set by Sonic the Hedgehog. And they didn't even nail it out of the gate, right? Like, they had to spend, the internet claims here, $5 million to redo the ugly Sonic, as he became dubbed, the ugly Sonic CGI. And you would think that with, a couple years behind, and you see what happened to the first, company that did this, why not, learn from that a little bit? It feels like they felt kind of isolated, because $5 million is, it's not exactly chump change. According to the internet, this random site from Australia says that you could buy a private island in the Maldives with $5 million, or you could buy a Gulfstream G150 private jet. So that's what it costs for Sonic to redo its main character. I'm kind of curious, if we'll ever see or hear the behind the scenes, what's going on here with the Mario Brothers movie.
But by the same token, you could take an African-American female actor, dress her up like a bat, make a movie, and then shelve it.
It's like a weird tax shelter move.
Yeah, and in 2, both inclusive and extremely discriminatory things, you can cast 2 of the most beautiful women of color and have them dyed green in the case of Guardians of the Galaxy, or make them a CGI alien in the case of the Star Wars latest trilogy in Maz Kanata.
Or Avatar.
Avatar. Like, again, I'm glad that these women are getting work. They deserve the work. They're amazing. But, hey, how about some actual representation?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess all the Brooklyn, New York plumbers are going to have no actor to identify with on film. Right?
I think they're just going to have to go for Team Luigi.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Speaking of not appropriate for this show, honey, what do you got for us?
This is such a strange one. So this is Megan with a 3 for the E in Megan. It is a horror movie that, if I thought about what would I throw into a blender to get this movie, I think I'd take the concepts from the Haley Joel Osment AI movie and Eddie Furlong's character from Terminator 2 and something like, the Chucky TV series, and put that in a blender. And now you basically have the idea for this movie that is this troubled girl ends up getting assigned a robotic doll friend called Megan that's supposed to be like the most sophisticated AI. And you can already guess that it goes bad, but it kind of seems like it goes bad in like a not a Chucky trying to take over her soul or kill her sort of way. It seems like it's actively like a Rottweiler protecting her in a way that makes no sense to a human and would make sense to an AI. Like it is like, Terminator 2 style, like protecting John Connor, like even to a crazy extent, right? Like, I'm going to shoot this person. No, don't shoot him. Like, that's not what you should do. And I'm also a little freaked out when I watch the trailer because I'm like, I don't know that this girl is CGI, the girl robot. I feel like they just put a mask on a kind of smaller, petite actress. Like, it's so weird and unsettling as I don't know, a modern take on where the world is going.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Obviously, they didn't incorporate the 3 laws of robotics, but yeah, it's got that same sort of, it definitely is a horror movie. I mean, like it started out. I mean, I kind of had a feeling it was going to go bad, in the same way. I mean, AI also kind of goes bad in its own way. It's got that sort of Pinocchio kind of goes off on the day trip kind of thing happening with Pinocchio or with AI, and because it had some unsettling moments in it too, right? But it reminds me of all those sort of the horror movies you see about the little orphan girl that gets adopted and turns out to be an actual, woman that hasn't grown and runs around killing people. And I forgot the name of the movie. The word orphan comes to mind, but typical of this kind of genre. I mean, for us, it's kind of interesting because it's intelligent. It's sort of that. What would happen if you built an AI and you gave it a bunch of rules, but maybe left some of the more ethical ones off the table, right? And it's kind of funny because the inventor is the aunt who admits that she knows nothing about kids, right? So kind of just desserts, as it were, right?
Yeah. This is a film that is coming out in that weird dead zone. It's coming out on January 13th. So
it's not a Halloween movie,
right? Why is this not coming out on Halloween? That is bananas, and it feels like maybe they don't have a lot of faith in this movie. But you know what? It streams real good, I'm sure. So wherever Universal stuff shows up nowadays, I'm gonna have to look that up. Probably through.
Yeah, no, it looks interesting. Oh, it's not going to the theaters. It's going to the theaters, or.
Yes, in theaters January 13th. But
wasn't there some sort of rule? Remember the rule about if you have a really good movie, don't release it in August or in January because it's too close to the Oscars?
Well, and January is a weird, like, again, clearly it's not an Oscar movie, so I don't think they have to worry about that. But it's also, it seems like that's the dumping ground, right? You put movies out there where you just kind of want to get them out there, try and make a couple bucks, and then go to streaming, or just put them out in streaming so people will find it eventually. I think you're right, guys. I think this sounds like a great movie for next October when you're looking for something scary to watch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I looked it up. Apparently, Universal Films, as of December 9th of 2021, are going to stream exclusively on Peacock as soon as 45 days after the debut. So if you're doing the math, that is Monday, February 27th, 2023. So certainly by that Halloween of 2023, if you're looking for a film.
So I'll get to choose between that and Mario, right?
I eagerly anticipate, Jaime. I'm looking forward to finding out when you will finally crack and get Peacock. What will be the tipping point on Peacock?
I'm so close because I looked at the monthly price for Peacock with ads. The cheapest here, it's like $5, I think. And the price today of what it would take to rent Jurassic World Dominion, I was like, oh, it's basically the same price. I guess maybe I should sign up for Peacock, at least for the 1 month, watch the movie I want to watch, and then rummage through the DVD bins, as they say, to see what's there, what else is on that service.
Yeah, wasn't there something else that we could only see on Peacock, John? I forget what it was.
Well, we're talking about Quantum Leap, but that's available, obviously.
Oh, Quantum.
Yeah. But yeah,
that's on
Quantum
Peacock?
Leap, I think in the United States is NBC Peacock thing, right?
Oh, okay.
I think so.
So I tried to watch another episode of that, didn't make it through. Have you been watching Quantum Leap, John or Jaime?
I have, and they're tying it in more to the original series. So again, not for everybody, but I am. So I'm looking for a new show that fits a particular model. We'll take 30 seconds here in this little side trip. So this is the fifth and final season of medical drama New Amsterdam, and it is the right kind of dumb for this need I have, which is I've had a long day, my brain is toast, I just need to go watch some trashy TV. And I don't want to call this, this continuation of Quantum Leap trashy per se. I think it's trying to be better than what network television sort of wants it to be. Like, they didn't have to go this far into tying it into the continuity of the original series, but it does have a lot of network television tropes in it they're kind of weird to get through. So I can understand why you don't like it, Tim. I feel like I'm embracing it as my guilty pleasure show to continue watching.
I think for me, The Rookie is my guilty pleasure show. We've been watching it for 5 seasons now, and that's the Nathan Fillion, adult cop movie, right? But I mean, and I told you guys years ago I swore off of hospital and police dramas because they're all the same, right? In the same way, like they don't really go beyond your typical stuff. In fact, like my one complaint about the Rookie is there is no pandemic. There hasn't been a pandemic for the last 2 years, and they're in the middle of LA, which makes absolutely no sense, right? Not a single mask to be found. So yeah, just complete. But I enjoy the show. But yeah, if I hold myself to my own high standards, I shouldn't be watching that show.
I think we've all had those shows. We they're so easy, they're so digestible, they're mindless in a positive way.
Yeah. So New Amsterdam. I'm curious about the title. Is it a reference to New York?
Yeah, it's the name of the public hospital in New York City.
Okay. Yeah, because New York was New Amsterdam originally, right?
That's correct.
All right. Well, some bad news from the world of Marvel films. Coming off the heels of a really cool announcement that we were going to get Hugh Jackman back playing Wolverine in Deadpool 3, which got the internet abuzz and continues to feed meme upon meme upon meme. We got a little bit of a shuffle this week with some of the announced releases for the Marvel film slate. So 6 movies: Blade, Deadpool 3, Fantastic Four, Avengers, Secret Wars, and 2 currently untitled projects have all had their release dates delayed. So they were supposed to start shooting, there's a story on Entertainment Weekly, they were supposed to start shooting the Blade movie soon, but apparently that's been delayed, and that has sort of had a knock on because, of course, these stories are all somewhat interrelated as they build towards a crescendo like the 2 Avengers movies they've announced and all the things that are coming. So Blade is coming out on November 6th, 2024. It was supposed to come out on November 3rd, 2023. We're supposed to get it just a little over a year from now, and it's now 2 years ahead. That's quite a bump to get knocked back. Deadpool 3 was supposed to be September 6th, 2024. It's now moved to November 2024, November 8th. Not a huge bump, but again, a knock-on of this. Fantastic Four was supposed to be out in November of 2024, but of course, the Deadpool's there. They moved that to February 14th, 2025. Happy Valentine's Day. And Avengers Secret Wars was supposed to be May 1st, 2026, which is that prime window, right? Like that's where the Avengers movies go. They bumped that all the way back to November of 2025. And then those 2 mystery projects have also been bumped back. And now we're looking at one was supposed to be the February slot. Now that that's moved until May of 2026. And there's another one coming after that as well. So yeah, like it's fun as a fan to have all these movies interrelated, but then you realize that it's a house of cards, right? If one thing goes wrong with one of them, it kind of does have these like pretty severe knock-ons up with having to wait an extra year just so they can get the slate lined up the way they want it to. And, it's funny because there's been some criticism of this slate of this phase of the Marvel Universe movies right now that we're in. People saying, well, it's kind of the weakest one we've had so far. And, have we really come that far? I think there was a lot of promise in this next phase. They've got people talking about, hey, we're going to do Deadpool 3. Hey, we're going to do 2 more Avengers movies, Fantastic Four, blah, blah, and then get them all knocked back is probably not what they were hoping for.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild shuffle here for this stuff. we know the shuffle happened with the Spider-Man movie and the Doctor Strange 2 because COVID kind of really messed things up.
Yeah.
I am a little curious what ended up causing these ones to bump so weirdly, because you're right, it is a whole tapestry they're weaving here, and you can't just sort of randomly do it out of order. So kind of curious why they had to make these changes.
Yeah. And I'm sure over time we'll get some insight into it. As I say, it's cool that they bring all these projects out and have this cohesive universe, but it does not come without a price, right?
Right.
And speaking of the MCU, we also got news this week. There's a rumor going around. It's reported by a bunch of different outlets, and it's being credited to the reporter Jeff Snyder, that Harrison Ford is going to replace William Hurt as Thunderbolt Ross in the Thunderbolts movie. I don't know how to feel about this. So I guess we have to discuss whether we want to get into spoiler country, because in the article that I've got linked in here, they do get into the spoiler of it all, which is just that Thunderbolt Ross is a bigger and more important character than he's been portrayed as so far in the MCU. In the MCU, he's kind of this schmuck who chases the Hulk around at first and then is like trying to cram the Sokovia Accords down the throats of the Avengers. And he's not a sweetheart. But in the Thunderbolts, he has much bigger role to play. And so this isn't necessarily a small role for Harrison Ford to take over. So I'm not sure how to feel about this. I will probably have to include the fact that I'm not terribly excited about a new Indiana Jones movie coming out with, I believe, 81-year-old Harrison Ford, who has kind of mumbled his way through the last couple decades of his career. He is the biggest movie star of my entire lifetime, hands down. From, his rise to fame really coincided with my boyhood, youth and manhood. He is the single biggest movie star that my life has intersected with, hands down. Been in more big movies, played more big roles, Blade Runner, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Patriot Games, there's so many indelible roles, plus all the other stuff that he's done that are, tremendous roles. I don't want it to just be completely sounding like ageism, but I just have not loved a lot of the performances I've seen from him the last number of years. And I'm not sure that I'm excited that he might be cast in this role.
Yeah. Well, maybe Chris Pratt was busy.
I think
I'm curious.
Chris Plummer was gone already, so he was off.
I don't disagree with you, Jonathan. I am a little curious who you would end up casting instead to replace William Hurt.
Ooh,
do you have an opinion on that?
Good question.
Well, so I literally Google searched, and it's the most superficial way, but it sort of brought to mind something that had, like, who I had picked was on this list. So when I Google searched that, I ended up with an IMDb page that says similar faces on the screen. So William Hurt is the same as William Hurt. All right, cool. That's fine. Jeff Daniels, which is who I thought might make a good choice to replace, was number 2 on the list. Scrolling through this list, I'm like, okay, I could see a Kurt Russell or and bear with me here, Jeff Bridges. Now I understand that causes some interesting things. It's a little weird, but they just don't even have to mention it or have to have She-Hulk mention it if you want. As one of those, we either don't mention it or it becomes a fourth wall breaking sort of moment.
Yeah.
So those are my choices from this very quick list.
Yeah, I took a quick look. So Harrison Ford is 80. He turned 80 this year. I did a quick look to see actors over the age of 70 as sort of a ballpark. And, there's a lot of prominent actors. You can decide where they fit, Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine, Clint Eastwood, Robert De Niro, Anthony Hopkins, Al Pacino, Ben Kingsley, Jack Nicholson, he's retired. Donald Sutherland, Dustin Hoffman. I'm like, none of these are really working for me in the way that I was like, I don't really see any of these people as Thunderbolt Ross. So I don't know. I don't know who popped into my head, and maybe it's just because he's played an SOB in so many movies. Harvey Keitel. He's kind of got that slicked back hair. You put a mustache on him.
Yeah, okay. I had to look him up because I didn't know the name, but yep. I see his face. I'm like, yep, that guy. That could work.
But I mean, Harrison Ford doesn't look anything like William Hurt, who played Thunderbolt Ross, and of course, we passed away early this year. But not that that's the most critical thing. I mean, they had two different guys playing, War Machine, and they don't look anything alike either. But yeah, it's kind of weird. Maybe we'll feel differently after we see Indiana Jones 5. Or maybe we'll never see Indiana Jones 5.
All right, one more thing to hit before we move into the main part of the show here, Jaime.
Yeah, the last one here is the long, talked about ads tier for Netflix is launching on November 3rd, 2022 in a bunch of different countries. Australia, Brazil, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Mexico, South Korea, Spain, United Kingdom, and the United States. Here in the US, it is $6.99 a month to have an average of 4 to 5 minutes total of ads per hour, broken up into, the normal 15, 30-second kind of thing that people like to do. The pricing is surprisingly high in the United States compared to the rest of the world that I can do the translation for. So, because we've got Canadians on the show, let me tell you, $5.99 Canadian is very cheap if it's $6.99 US, because that is, Google says, $4.31 equivalent to the US.
Take that, America.
There you go.
Yeah.
The Australians were cheering in the comments on this Verge article, like, oh my gosh, it's so cheap compared to what we thought it was going to be, because we always get boned by the exchange rate. So,
well, the first thing that comes to mind with this story is, does Netflix want to lose more people watching their network?
Well,
by putting ads in the way?
It's intended, I'm not saying it's going to work out that way necessarily, but it's intended to increase the addressable market, because they've continued to go up and up and up each year for holding the line as like, no ads, no ads. Well, guess what? It costs like $1 billion to make whatever movies they made recently. So it's got to be a couple more bucks a month, right? And that has left out the people who are like, man, I can't pay like $20 a month for this thing, but I might go the El Cheapo route and say $6.99 a month. Yeah, that's why nature gave me a smartphone, so I could do something during the 30 seconds you're showing me an ad for Budweiser. Or heck, you know what? Instead of pausing, maybe I just will go, urinate the Budweiser from my body. So it kind of makes sense to me. Like, I've got the cheap Hulu on the $1 a month Black Friday deal from last year that's coming up. I've been a longtime subscriber to the cheapest tier for Paramount Plus, so I always see ads for Star Trek and stuff.
Oh, do you? Okay.
So I could see it working. Will it alienate people? Well, if you were already somebody who didn't want ads, then you got to, back up the truck full of dough and pay your monthly fee, or deal with the blight of ads for a significant savings in price. It does mention here in the article that you won't have access to the entire catalog, but apparently that's not because Netflix was being, greedy punks. It's because of the rights agreements that they have that they are actively working to try to resolve.
We'll have to see how it goes. I don't know. I mean, I already pay $100 and something a month for regular network cable television, which has commercials, right? So, which I suffer through if I'm watching something live, but yeah, it just seems odd, like in this age, where this app on your phone age, where you either get something free or you get it with ads, right? Or, I mean, if you get something free, you get it with ads. If you pay for it, you don't get ads. I mean, that's sort of the model, right? It's an odd thing. I guess because I mean, like, I would think that using advertising as a way of paying for something that, it's, I guess they're not making enough money off of the lowest tier. Is that what the problem that Netflix is suffering from?
I think it's that they're hemorrhaging for the first time.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, it's hard to charge that premium price when you are no longer the only show in town. And sure. Disney came in with a very aggressive price of was it $7 or $8 when they started out? They've gone up a bit, but they could double their price and they would still be cheaper than Netflix. They kind of had no choice but to do this.
Arguably with their content too, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other thing, I don't know if you mentioned it, Jaime, but the quality of the Netflix for this tier is low too, right? Apparently
it's kept at 720p. You can't download, if you're going to go on an airplane trip or something. So there's tons of restrictions, as you would kind of expect. I've dealt with those myself on both Paramount Plus and Hulu, where I was like, all right, I'm going to go on this airplane trip. Maybe I'll get, nope, can't download those. All right, Netflix and HBO Max it is. and Amazon Prime. So I think it's a little weirdly petty of like, how often would somebody really need to be downloading the videos to really make it worth the, well, I guess I'll pay for the higher tier for the video downloads. I don't know. I'm sure they have a rationale around it because it's more than just one of these providers that does it. You would think if it was not tied to rights or not tied to some really specific user research, market research, there would be somebody that'd be like, yeah, whatever, our cheapest tier, go ahead and download. Why not? In fact, we download the ads too, so good luck. You're going to be watching those Budweiser ads on the plane.
Yep.
Interesting stuff. All right, well, let's move on to our main part of the show where we're talking about a few things these days, but obviously we're talking about Star Trek Lower Decks is up first.
My elevator pitch for this episode of Star Trek was the crew goes the extra mile to show why sequels aren't always better. I mean, what was your pitch for this one?
Mine was a little bit more like the Netflix style one of Boimler is distracted from his own holo novel when Commander Ransom gives him bad news about his transporter twin.
So this was a follow-up to last season's very epic episode where Mariner wrote a holodeck program wherein she can go vent her frustrations and kill her coworkers. This time, Boimler's taken the reins and done it, but of course, it as you say, it goes kind of sideways when he gets this bad news about his transporter twin dying, and so we don't know that until later in the episode, but that's obviously skewing things. So it's kind of half them going on this adventure and half him having this sort of existential existence as we go through the episode. And it still added up in spite of the fact that, like they do tread a really fine line here, in spite of the fact that they were dealing with, what's the purpose of being here? Do I really matter in the grand scheme of things? All these existential things that Boims is going through, they still made me laugh a lot in this episode. There's a lot of good stuff in here.
Yeah, it's fun time. It's fun. Like it's a holodeck episode, right? I mean, where the crew is, acting out their fantasy roles of being in charge of ships, and Tendi. We find out through the story that Tendi wants to be a captain at some point. But yeah, the whole I love when there's conflict or whatever, and then somebody says computer or Arch, and then solves the problem, and the Arch shows up, and away they go, right?
Yeah, nice character moments for stuff that, hypothetically is, a fun change of pace for them, right? It isn't meant to be taken too seriously of what they're doing. It's, sort of cheesy on purpose. My best pew 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 was the grav cycle sequence where you've got the exploding grav cycle and a backflip to land at Tendi landing on Rutherford's grav cycle and stuff, and to have it be sort of built around her really coming out of her shell as a character and like having aspirations, ambitions, coupled with the sort of almost nihilistic take that Boimler suddenly has when he realizes his transporter twin died this pointless death, or so he thinks, right? Kind of interesting to see how that's put in around Mariner being like, what? It's like, this is so dumb. That guy's just like made up by the holodeck. Wait, this isn't even the main plot. We should go over and do the grav bikes and do all these other cool things.
But it's very meta too. Like that is also a beautiful commentary on modern gaming too, right? Where it's like, there's this grand epic storyline that people took hours and hours and hours and hours and hundreds of people to craft. And you're like, I'm going to try and catch that horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I remember the first time I played, I want to say it was like Elder Scrolls or one of those games way back when I was doing video game stuff for the website and the paper. But I remember cracking it open, and they were like, all of these side missions, it seemed like you couldn't go 4 feet without somebody being like, would you like to come over here and try this thing, sir? And I just remember thinking, like, you could just spend all your time doing absolutely nothing that had anything to do with the core construct or mission of this game. And then it came true later on, because my elder son was playing Red Dead 2, which of course is this huge sandbox game. And the amount of time he spent dressing up his horse, I'm like, man, really?
Yeah.
But I love the sequence where it's like, it doesn't even have a side plot. It's loading it right now. It's waiting. It's killing time, but it loads side plot for you. I did. I liked the Kirk thing. Tim, that was my best pew pew pew. When it tells us about the Kirk thing.
I think, yeah. What is it? I think, is it Bumler starts wailing on somebody? Yeah, he starts wailing on somebody, and she's like, we can do this and we can do that, and then finally he starts wailing on this other character, and she says, "Oh yeah, we can do the Kirk thing. That'll do."
I love that the Kirk maneuver is like, solve it with your fists.
You and I both picked that. Exactly. Like, no diplomacy here.
Absolutely. Here, right? I did pick a couple of Easter eggs out. They mentioned Winger Binkston. There's a character that's popped up in a few previous episodes. He's the one who's like the song and dance band. They talked about seeing his show. At one point, Mariner makes a crack about like, oh, somebody took a Winger Binkston class. So again, funny like self-reference to itself. And the planet that they go to at one point is Tatashiori 9. Fred Tatashiori is the guy who does the actor who does Shax on the show. So that was pretty funny. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I see.
The nice touch I liked was the I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was film grain in some of the sequences, and then what caught my eye was the cigarette burn. When after watching Fight Club, I've really tuned into every time I see a cigarette burn on a show, right? Because it's pointless here in a digital show, right?
Well, we can talk about that and later in the episode. Maybe we'll talk about Werewolf by Night, because they had some stuff in there too. Oh, I was just going to say that the aha moment I had was just so this episode turns out his existential crisis that Boimler goes through turns out to be based on a lie, right?
Yeah, that ending scene, Section 31, involved in nuttiness with a cloaking Defiant class, which they definitely should not have, right? So not on the up and up.
I did love I love that this show says what we've all been thinking all these years. That they hand him his Section 31 badge, which of course is the black version of the Starfleet logo. He's like, "Hey, this is a super secret organization. Are we kind of tipping our hand when all of our logos are dark black?" And they're like, "We could just kill you again." And he's like, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine."
Yeah, and we mentioned earlier that there was a sort of a Nexus kind of section of the episode where you see Kirk's farm and with the horses and stuff, and it turns out it's not Kirk, it's actually Sulu, Captain Sulu, who gives Boimler the advice. And
there were so many great, this whole thing was kind of mercilessly mocking the Star Trek sequel and sci-fi sequels in general, from the original replicating the original fanfare with the opening credits and everything like that, straight to them going on this weird side mission and encountering the Kitty Hawk as opposed to V'ger. The Kitiha, that was, oh my god, I laughed at that. That made me laugh so hard. I was actually thinking when I heard Kitiha, I was like trying to put it together, and yeah, of course it was the Kitty Hawk, which that's just so stupid. It's so stupidly funny.
Yeah, I laughed out loud. I was like, I knew pretty early on. I was like, that has to be Kitty Hawk, right? It's got to be a V'ger reference. And I just could not contain myself when he's knocking the dust off. It's this like bicycle biplane from a century ago. Like it had become sentient in some way. Doesn't make any sense.
Stupid, but God, it made me laugh. Yeah, no, again, this show is so both loving to its legacy and so disrespectful at the same time. It is such a great high wire act that it never disappoints this show.
Yeah, and then they roll Stevens into the sick bay.
Second time today.
He's got radiation burns from leaning the second time today. Exactly.
Yeah.
From leaning against.
I did grab the one quote that made me laugh the hardest, which was when they were talking about the MacGuffin from this episode, which is the chronogamy. And Mariner says, what does it do? Does it make an alternate cinematic timeline that runs concurrent to our own, but with different people playing younger versions of us? That, again, just very meta, but perfect.
Yeah.
I was a fan of seeing animated forms of the Sovereign class, the Defiant class, and sort of the Galaxy class from the schematics or animation that they were showing. That was nice. And that led me into thinking about my big question, which is, will William Boimler's name, given that he died, come up in some sort of context for the USS Titan A in Star Trek Picard?
Ooh, interesting.
So he hypothetically died, not really a heroic death, but he died while serving on the USS Titan. Will his name come up at all in the context of the USS Titan A, which is starring in Star Trek Picard? So that's one we're going to have to keep an eye out for as an Easter egg.
That's a good one.
Like a William Boimler holodeck room or conference room or something, right? Is like a way to honor him in a not too fancy
I really
kind of way.
hope they bring back Jonathan Frakes as Riker and have him wear like a black armband, or that's just something just completely over the top, you know? Oh, that's good. That's a good call.
All right. Should we move on to the She-Hulk season finale? So it's really cool. It starts off with a reference to the old TV show Hulk, the Incredible Hulk, with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, with the sort of 70s introduction, and with Tatiana Maslany playing sort of, I guess, or cloned into the Lou Ferrigno scenes, you know, showing how She-Hulk has gone off the rails, much in the same way that don't get me angry. We don't like me when I'm angry, Hulk, kind of thing. That Bill Bixby and definitely pretty cool. But
it's funny. There's a nice little homage in there too, because the name of that show is The Savage She-Hulk, which of course was the name of the first book that ever Jen Walters' character appeared in, was The Savage She-Hulk. So nice little reference in there. It was just, again, this was a weird episode. So my elevator pitch was Jen's life is an irreparable mess. Good thing the rules don't apply to her. So the whole thing was that it was supposed to basically be this culmination of all these storylines, the misogynistic group, the intelligentsia that had, tried to destroy her life. She got in trouble for using her powers, all of these, supporting storylines. And they brought it all together. And then they were like, nope, this isn't working. Jen sort of breaks the fourth wall, climbs through the Disney Plus app and into the back door of Disney headquarters, and then confronts her creator. And again, a very sort of, and which would the whole part of naming that thing Kevin after Kevin Feige made me laugh hysterically. Kevin, yeah.
You mean Kevin?
But it was really weird, and I'm still trying to reconcile whether it worked for me. What did you guys think?
Oh, that was hilarious. The way she kind of for a second there, I thought my app had frozen because it went back to the menu, right? And then I realized the menu wasn't correct, and I mean, I like that. I like the part where she turns to the audience and says, "Is this what you want?" Like with all these, the Kingpin turning into like a Hulk guy by just injecting her radioactive blood, and
suspiciously like this super soldier serum.
Soldier serum. That's what it was. Yeah, and the Tim Roth character, Abomination. Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sort of all sort of beating each other and whacking around and whatever. That's when she leaves the show and goes and confronts the writers. And then we find out that Kevin Feige, or Kevin, is actually a sentient robot that's been making all this amazing Marvel stuff.
The fact that it's a robot that doesn't sleep explains how they could do all the work that Kevin Feige's been doing the last 15 years.
Right.
With attention towards hey, it's expensive when you change, so why don't you just do it when the camera's not on you? Like right now, while I'm talking, the camera's on me was kind of an interesting, it was weirdly sort of meta, and I did have the big question come out here of are the Disney Plus menu and Kevin Feige canon in the MCU now? I don't know how that works now.
It was definitely a weird one. I must admit, as they were trying to sort of bring those storylines together, I was sort of like, well, that's a weird coincidence that like they'd be having this meeting at the same place where she showed up, and this is not. I hope this isn't what this is really, because this would be a really disappointing ending. And then of course, the leader, Todd, the leader guy, he's stolen her blood and he injects it into himself. And I thought, well, this would be a really weird way to introduce the concept of the character from the comic books, the leader, who is this sort of gamma enhanced person. But the gamma basically, instead of giving him like massive muscles, enhances his brain. So I thought, oh, is he going to like inject this in his arm thinking he's going to get Hulk powers? But in fact, it's going to just make his brain pop out of his head and he's going to become super smart or something. I'm like, he seems like a really weird, weaselly supporting character to suddenly become the leader. The leader's supposed to be like, more menacing than all this. And then, of course, they sort of, record scratch and it stops and they're like, what? This doesn't make any sense. I'm like, good. Yes, I agree. Thank you for doing that. That's so good. Because it was really kind of going off the rails there for a bit, and then, Bruce shows up. And again, having Bruce show up to sort of come to her rescue again in a show that has been all about how Jen is finding herself and coming into her own and doesn't need, these men to carry her. She's an independent person. I was like, oh, this has gone really badly. And of course it's all the joke, right? So it was a weird way to do it, but in the end, probably more ultimately satisfying. I love that she sort of takes the ownership of it. She's like, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it my way. I use the law to put these guys in jail. I have my really hot boyfriend show up at the end for no good reason to do nothing but come to, a meal with my family. And, I get my name cleared and I get to be She-Hulk again. That's how they do the reset. I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a much better ending. More appropriate for the show, right?
Yeah.
It fits in with the wackiness of the show. And the show itself made the point that She-Hulk, the show, is not about punching, right? We talked previous week that like she literally can't punch her way out of misogyny or revenge porn or anything like that. So I appreciated that it subverted expectations by going into the weird, the villain has the same powers as the hero trope that Marvel's been criticized about and brought up in the show, and that it had the big action sequence, which was the pew 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 of like, come at me, bro, and the Abomination showing up, and there's a misunderstanding where the Hulk shows up, just assumes that bad things are happening, he starts punching. I appreciated that they subverted that and said, no, that's not what this is about. This is about a hero that never really wanted to answer the call. They just wanted to live their life and deal with the ramifications. And I also appreciated the fact that Abomination was never evil in this show, right? He truly was reformed. Yes, he did violate his parole. He showed up seemingly to that intelligentsia meeting, convention, whatever it was. Basically, as a guy who's just paid to be there to give motivational speeches, it seemed like he had no clue what was going on, and they just paid him to be Abomination, so he shows up. So, kind of appreciated that.
Yeah, no, and it made sense within the context of who he is, and the fact that he was just like, I made a mistake, I'm going back to jail for a while, or not, again, because that's the PS scene to this one, right?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was a nice little turn of phrase when he asked Wong, oh, were you stuck in another show? They answered as like, oh yeah, like, there's so much TV to watch. I'm like, maybe Wong's going to be on another show. Maybe that's them telling us that he's going to show up on another one of these Disney Plus shows.
Yeah, that or the Abomination is going to be in the next Doctor Strange movie.
Mm-hmm. Well,
which would be
things
weird.
Haven't been going well for Kamar-Taj. Maybe they needed a little more muscle on the premises.
Maybe. And so your Easter egg about Scar, is that a character? So Bruce Banner introduces his adopted son or something?
Yeah, so Scar is a character from the comic book universe, and in the comic book universe, something somewhat similar to what happened with him in Thor Ragnarok happens. He is basically exiled from Earth by the Illuminati, and he ends up on this planet Sakaar, and he ends up becoming a gladiator, and he lives there for a long time, and with a woman that he falls in love with there, they do conceive a child, and later on that child comes around and it's part of the storyline. Here, where they're going to continue the storyline, I'm not sure. I was 100% sure when he was like, I've got a call from space. I'm like, that's 100% going to be you going to pick up Scar. But how they continue this, where they go with this, I am curious. Like, it's a weird thing to sort of drop in at the end of the episode and then be like, to be continued. I don't know where that character connects with the overall storyline. I don't know where Bruce shows up next. I'm really curious to see how this plays out. But it is interesting to note that from the MCU perspective, Scar would have been not necessarily Bruce's child, but Hulk's, right? So the whole time that they were on Sakaar and they were fighting as a gladiator, Hulk was in charge, not Bruce. So this would have been Hulk as Hulk conceiving a child with somebody. So this isn't really Bruce Banner's son. This is Hulk's son. Splitting hairs or atoms, as you prefer. It is interesting to think about what that could mean for a character like Scar going forward.
True.
Yeah.
All right. Move on to Andor, the conclusion to the 3-story arc.
I went for the ominous elevator pitch on this one, making it out alive.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah.
So this one was, as you said, a culmination of this 3-episode arc. As about last week, they did a good job of really making us care about crew that Cass was going to go on this heist with, of giving them these backstories, of finding these connections. So as heists go, especially heists that involve Cassian Andor or missions that involve Cassian Andor, it goes pear-shaped pretty fast. And, as this episode is going on, we see members of this crew he's been working with start dropping as they go. And in the end, it's a bit of a bloodbath. There's 3 of them that end up making it out, and pretty bad. But
true, but he only takes the portion he was promised, right? So
right.
Yeah. But he also Nemec's manifesto, right?
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Nemec had been trying to sort of convert him into, a believer versus a mercenary. And I guess that's the question that I had from this episode. Is Nemec's manifesto the thing that sort of turns him from...
Maybe if he actually takes the time to read it, which I think he obviously will in the next episode or 2. But... Or does
Nemec's manifesto get into the hands of somebody like, Rebellion, one of the heads of the Rebellion, who does the template, says why we've got to fight back?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems strange that they would have such an earnest character. Obviously, he tragically in this, but to have his legacy be that he was the one who sort of wrote the manifesto, very poignant.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and then Cassian Andor does a typical Cassian Andor when Scheme turns on the crew and says let's take the money and run kind of thing.
Yeah, that's my Easter egg specifically is. And this is the part that always kind of bothers me. Greedo shot first thing. I'm disappointed that it's been Lucas's legacy to traverse it and say, oh no, he was defending himself. Because to me, even as a young boy, my concept was when we meet Han Solo, he is a mercenary, he is a criminal, he is somebody who, to protect himself and the people around him, would not hesitate to pull out his gun and kill somebody cold blood.
Exactly.
And that's has always been my issue with.
Yeah.
That's it.
He's a badass.
Well, that's it. Is the idea that it's not that he wants to kill; it's that he's willing to kill if he needs to. Right. And that's where I think we find Cass here too. Cass isn't a murderer. He's not cold-blooded. It's not that these things don't weigh on him. Clearly they do. And Diego Luna is such a wonderful performer. His face, he conveys through his face, and his eyes are so good. It's not easy for him to pull out a gun and shoot somebody. But the point is, he is somebody who is not hesitant to make that quick call and make the tough decisions. We saw it in Rogue One where he realizes, hey, I can get out of this, but this other guy can't. And if this guy gets caught, this whole mission goes sideways. I have to kill this guy. And he does. And he agonizes about it. And it's not something easy for him. He makes that hard call. And in the same moment here, Cass shoots first. He's talking with Skeen, and you're like, huh, this is really messed up that Skeen had, betrayed them and was trying to get his money in the whole 9 yards. And Cass doesn't hesitate, just pulls out his gun and puts a hole in the guy. And I think that's important because it really speaks to who he is in this moment. He's somebody who will make a hard choice, especially if it comes down to, if Skeen is saying, hey, you and I could get out of here and take the money, we'll go to this private spot. There's no way Skeen isn't thinking, and then I'll put a hole in you and I'll have 80 million credits, right? So he's doing the math in his head, and he's like, hey, this guy is going to, jeopardize me, jeopardize my place, probably kill me, no matter how this plays out. I have two choices. I can either try and get the job on him later, or I can, deliver what I said deliver, put a hole in this guy and walk away. And
I think it fits pretty well with the overarching theme of everything is gray in this story. So the first one I'll talk about, since you guys were talking about Nemec and Andor, Cassian, there's some point at which Nemec, before the heist, that Nemec's like sort of idealistically talking about essentially good and evil, right? Like, should we just, be thankful for like these scraps that the Empire is giving us? And Andor looks him right in the face. He's like, do I look thankful to you? He's like, no, I'm just essentially not stupid enough to take on the Empire, right? I just try to survive is his standpoint. So he's, neither good nor bad. He's just a person looking to exist and live and not fight an idealistic war. And we see a lot of gray here where, the good guys here, the protagonists of our show here, they threatened to kill a kid, right? The Imperial officer's family, right? Would they have actually done it? We never get that far, but like that kid was, an innocent in this case. And seeing that is interesting because this whole time they've been portraying the Empire, or at least this part of it, as not the cackling evil Emperor Palpatine twirling his mustache, as more just like they're just here doing their jobs. Some of them are trying to be pretty good, figure out what's going on with these crimes. Some of them they're definitely jerks, right? They're nationalistic, specious, racist, whatever you want to call it, but like they're not actively evil. They're just not necessarily good people, right? And they're kind of just living their lives too.
It's a good point, Jaime, but there's one spot in this that takes it to that next notch. Like they're creeping in evil territory when the troops are walking towards where Val and Cinta are hiding, and they're talking. If you listen to the words they're saying, they're essentially laughing about rape. So not good. It's right. These are
sure. I'm not saying that they were like shining, upstanding people, but it seems less black and white, good and evil with very broad brushes, but more like the commandant guy, where he's very condescending towards the native peoples and everything. And he's like, I can't wait to get off this backwater planet, and yet he's got basic sort of problems, like he doesn't want to admit that he's gotten fat. That's why his uniform doesn't fit, right? It's a humanizing aspect that is interesting to see. The heroes less than perfectly good, and the villains less than perfectly bad. I like where they're exploring with this.
Yep. It's something I saw a few people commenting online. I wish I could take credit for noticing it first, but this show so far has been, especially in this arc, focused on people and not aliens.
Right.
You're not really seeing a lot in this particular arc, and you're right. It almost smacks a little bit of being speciesist. Like, why aren't the other races helping out or whatever? But of course, they're trying to be undercover, blend in with the population. Like, and there's a random alien. But it is interesting, and it's very grounding, I think, to take the alien element out of it, take the laser sword out of it, to take the sci-fi down to a more in the dirt kind of level on this mission, because it really does increase the stake.
That's true. The one alien they did have, the doctor, his name is Dr. Quadpaw, according to the subtitles.
Well, they worked hard. They worked hard on that one.
That was his name.
That was his name, according to. I always run with the subtitles, and when he's like, I did my best. Please don't shoot me. I didn't kill the kid. I tried to save him. It says Dr. Quadpaw because there's a couple people talking at the same time, and that is his name. Quadpaw, one word.
Really?
Did we all have the best pew 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 as the escape flight with the TIE fighters in pursuit? Like, it kind of was the only pew 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 for the most part, other than the shooting around the gold credits.
Well, also the sky display was kind of cool.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Even though it's not technically a pew pew, right?
Yeah, but it really enhances the moment where they, you see it all, this whole plot come together with, we're going to use this thing as the disguise. But it also was something, what I love best, and, we talked about different shows in the past. We talked about Foundation last year, the Apple TV Plus series. Not the best sci-fi series around. But to me, the thing I liked about it was it wasn't just piggybacking on everybody else's thing. And that's how I felt watching this part with the eye was, it didn't feel like something else I'd seen specifically. It was a unique vision, and that I appreciate, especially from something as deep now as Star Wars, where we've had, movies galore and TV shows and comics and books and, animated series and everything else. To see something that's a unique vision, when that starts happening and the sounds of it and the look of it, that I like that. I really liked that it was something that I wasn't just like, oh, it's just like the thing in this other thing.
Yeah. By the way, it is Dr. Quadpaw. Just checked on IMDb. But he's a puppeteer. He appears in a lot of shows. He's also in The Eye. Oh no, it's the same show we just watched, right? He was in episode The Rise of the Skywalker. Yeah. Jonathan's favorite Star Wars. And he also played a character called Two Tubes in Rogue One, so who knew? Yeah.
Hardworking dude.
I guess.
Keep busy.
It's true. Does he get 4 times?
I think in the fine tradition of Star Wars, who in the past have named a character with 3 eyes, we just called him like 4 arms.
Well, they did Quadpaw.
Yeah.
Or the paw. Yeah.
There you go. I had a couple of good quotes. That same spot you were talking about, Jaime, where Nemec is talking to Cass, and he starts saying, Nemec is talking about how he's feeling, and he's kind of tired, and he's not sure how he feels. And Cass says, "Don't worry, the excitement will kick in." I feel like that was for the audience, because last episode we talked about was really action free. It was really, a build up. I feel like that one was for the fan. Just hold on to your socks. This is going to get good. And then at the end where, Skeen says, luck, it drives the whole damn galaxy, doesn't it? I thought that was a pretty good callback to the Han Solo concept.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that we're only halfway. This is a 12-episode series, right?
It is.
It's interesting that we're halfway through this, because it feels like, that could be a cliffhanger ending for a season 1, right? A short miniseries of like,
oh yeah,
dude got away. Yeah. Watch next season to see how does he, not just go live off his life. How does he become further entrenched in the rebellion? We see Luthen, happily surprised that the whole attack went off correctly. That it's big news that people are talking about it in his shop.
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem strange? Wouldn't you think if this is a totalitarian regime, especially on Coruscant, so maybe somewhere further out in the Rim or Outer Rim, obviously there's other, there could be other ways of getting information. But wouldn't you think that one of the things that Palpatine, if he's ruling an empire, would have done is control the media?
Maybe he's really Mark Zuckerberg in a cape.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. But that was just for maybe it's just my previous existence, but I just found myself thinking, if you're going to have a totalitarian regime, the first thing you do is take over media and kill everybody who talks bad about you. So they're, when they're like, oh, there's this incident on this planet, and you should read about it here in the Holo News. I was thinking, there's no way that the Imperials let people know about that because it gives people hope. Like, wouldn't that be the first thing you'd shut down? Be like, oh, no, don't talk about that.
I guess it depends on what their strategy is, because there is a potential strategy here and this monstrous attack is why we've instituted these new rules. It's why we've locked down even further for harmony.
Well, I could see the Imperial security team, the guys in white. I mean, they're going to kick into action for damage control, right? But yeah, I could see your point, Jonathan. They probably would shut the media down. Like the general public wouldn't hear about this, right?
Yeah, because again, it's anything that destabilizes a tyrannical government is bad, right? You wouldn't want your opposing forces to have any news that they would consider positive. You don't want them claiming any kinds of victory. You want that silenced. So,
you wouldn't want to admit that your maple syrup reserves have been broken into, right?
That's a different matter.
That's a cross reference from another show that Jaime and I are on. But
yeah. Well, I read that story online. Yeah, and it's interesting that specifically the Imperial officers in that security building that we sort of touched back and forth on, when the main Imperial is sort of saying, hey, tuck in, kids, we're all going to be here all night. He doesn't say like we're going to discuss, our security. He says we're going to talk about retaliation. That's the word he uses, is retaliation. So I'm curious. So it was probably lost on a lot of people. You kind of have to be in the weeds. But when Mon Mothma is giving her speech when the news breaks in the Senate, she's talking about this one race of people and how they're being oppressed and they just want their basic rights and they're being treated badly. We know how that plays out for those people. There is a massacre on that planet. Imperials go in and kill a lot of them. I wonder if that's the response to this, is them putting their foot down on the necks of one group of people to punish another.
Oh, is it the planet where the eye is that they're going to go by?
No. She's talking about this one planet where they're fighting. I can't remember off the top of my head. I meant to write it down. I didn't. She's talking about this one planet where the people are demanding their rights, and she wants to send a fact-finding mission to try and clarify that these people, aren't what they're being portrayed as, that they're actually innocent, and they just want to stand up for their rights. But again, we know through the history of the expanded universe that this planet does fall under the boot of the Empire in the not distant future. It's part of the rebellion. So I wonder if that gets brought into this. And we talked about how they mentioned Kessel in the previous episode. We're seeing the sparks of the rebellion happening in a bunch of different places. And what we're going to see in response to that is the Empire trying to snuff those out with their boot heels. And in some cases, it works. Like they do mercilessly dispatch a lot of innocent people during this stretch.
So that bit of insight into the canon and the lore is going to make my current statement a little bit more awkward, but I'm weirdly rooting for the Imperial security folks. like I know, like I'm just really clear to those of you transporting home. I know they're the bad guys. I know they're the Empire, but this show has done a good enough job of humanizing them. Granted, I didn't know that they were going to, go commit some genocide here, but like, we talked about the office politics part, right? That they're just like, you see that angle of them of just like working their jobs. It's just like this normal job, this oh crap moment has happened to them, and they are reacting to it in a way that seems fairly real. And I'm rooting for them in a, like, I know they're gonna lose and I know they're the bad guys. I'm rooting for them in the way you would root for like a good villain, and I feel like that's a good bit of writing and portrayal, that they're not just like boo, hiss, kind of caricatures.
Oh, I mean, we've talked about it through a lot of the genre TV that we've talked about. What makes the best hero stories is the best villains. I think if you can create complex villains like we had with, for just to pull one out of the air, Thanos, I think that there's a real value to that in making sure that you get, characters that are, the meme that was going around inside the MCU and outside the MCU, Thanos was right? There are people who would look at this and be like, well, what's wrong with the Empire, strip mining planets if it's for the greater good? And, there are people that think that way. I didn't realize Jaime was one of them, but, that's a different matter.
But also Deirdre Miro's got to get her, like, she was right about her prediction that these random events weren't really random, and now hopefully it's going to bubble up to her superior that she in fact was calling it right, even though she was shot down. But she was shot down by the guy that was shooting her down was the conspirator, right? He was the guy that went to the planet and helped them with the robbery, right?
No, that was a different fellow. No, he's the one that goes back to Cass's old planet and is like, "We're in charge here now." That's a different guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and also we have to have our Boimler character. What's his name again?
Oh, Karn.
Karn. Yeah, he needs to sort of have some sort of redemption too, or is he just going to suffer his mother's wrath for the next 30 years?
Yeah, I'm glad that they didn't break too far away in this episode to the machinations on Coruscant or him or anything else. So I'm glad that they sort of stayed focused on the heist because tension had been built up so well. I'm glad that we didn't have to get into that, but you're right. I think it has to circle back around with all these things coming together and coming to a head eventually, even if it's, the next couple of arcs as we build towards the end of the season and look ahead to the next one.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see.
It's great TV though, man. They're killing it. This is. I said to someone the other day, they were saying, asking me, well, what are you watching? Like, what's this? What are your recommendations? And I said, Andor is the best non-Star Wars stories I think I've ever seen. Like it's so grounded and visceral in a way that Star Wars has kind of lost sight of in a lot of ways. Like, and I say that to include things like Book of Boba Fett. This is just such a small story, but yet such a personal and yet universe expanding story. It's just really, really compelling television, and it happens to be set in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, that's true. Well, speaking of amazing television,
we
talk about House of Dragon, Lord of the Tides.
Yes. My elevator pitch: a new challenge to the legitimacy of Rhaenyra's sons brings all the king's family home for a fancy feast and a final farewell.
Ooh,
that's a good one. I went with the more cheeky bloodlines and where to find them, sort of the overall theme here, because they talk a lot in the remember last time segment was like, hey, remember how Corlys Velaryon said, history doesn't remember blood, it remembers names. So that felt like it was quite appropriate for this episode where there is that question of the bloodlines.
Yeah. So I guess the deeper elevator pitch for this one is Corlys is injured in battle. It's 6 years later than where we left the previous episode. Corlys is injured in battle, and the idea of him dying and leaving the Driftmark throne to, this would be Lucerys, Luke, the second child of theoretically Rhaenyra and Leonor, who everyone believes is dead, is sort of set up to happen. And Corlys's brother, Vemund, comes and sort of says, this clearly not black child is not our bloodline. We have existed since before there, since old Valyria. We cannot have this little Caucasian kid sitting on our throne and representing the history of our house. He's clearly not part of the family. And so this is, of course, something that the Hightowers are waiting to have happen, because they want, of course, their bloodline to sit on the throne at King's Landing, and they also want them to have all these seats of power. And for them, if they got Vaemont on that throne as opposed to Lucerys, it's a win for them because it puts them in more positions of power and it legitimizes their hold on the throne. So it leads to everybody and their donkey ending up in King's Landing once again 6 years later. And man, the fireworks from there are amazing.
Yeah. And Viserys is pretty beat up. I mean, he's even worse off than we saw last week with, we see later on lost an eye and wearing a bandage over his head for half of the thing. And
Phantom of King's Landing?
Later, the Phantom of King's Landing with a nice gold mask and all that kind of stuff. And yeah. But the best pew pew has got to be the part where, he stumbles into the courtroom, and there's this big, throne room, and there's this big, long, really drawn out march to the throne. And then, when the brother challenges the legitimacy and says the B word, he says, "I'll have your tongue," and he stands up with his knife in his hand, and next thing you know,
Daemon and Dark Sister, the sword, the Valyrian sword. they set that up so beautifully in the previous episode, because when Alicent slashes Rhaenyra's arm and Rhaenyra is getting her arm sewn up, the Maester says, you're going to have a scar, but luckily Valyrian steel cuts clean. And then to do that the following week, where one slice from Dark Sister and this dude's face falls off. Like, oh my God. That was...
Yeah.
I feel like it says a lot that
it's good. And
you all appreciated. These were my two ones. So my best pew 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 was King Viserys and his Walk of Pride, which I thought was really well done. And my "they said what" quote was Daemon saying he can keep his tongue, because there's just like a bottom half of a jaw.
Freeze frame for a second. As he's falling, his tongue is flapping out of the bottom half of his body. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. Yeah, no, that was
nice.
You're right, Jaime. That scene where Viserys, who we established earlier on, so when Daemon and Rhaenyra show up, they go back up to his chambers. He's in bed. He's in terrible shape. He's clearly they figure out that he's also hooked up. He's on him, and they introduce him to his namesake. They're two of their, and they've got a third child on the way. But we see him in really, really, really bad shape. And again, it's been an awful descent for him over the course of these episodes, but we know that he's on the precipice of going. And, Rhaenyra comes to him later in the day and sort of says, I need you. You have to help me. And apparently that stinks through this haze. And so he pulls himself out of bed and he shows up and it's that, it's like a Perry Mason moment, right? Where you've got Otto Hightower sitting on the throne. Princess Rhaena, who is Corlys's wife, shows up and she says to Rhaenyra, like, the Hightowers are about to strike their first blow. You're not going to win here. You're in deep trouble here. And then Otto's on the throne, and it looked like no matter how good they base, that he's going to rule in favor of screwing around with their legacy and how things are supposed to go according to Viserys's wishes. And then Viserys, the music comes up and he does that long walk. Oh man, if Paddy Considine doesn't win an Emmy Award for this performance, like, he's been great throughout, but this was like through the roof good. That scene alone, and then the feast scene that comes after it. This guy was amazing in this show, Paddy Considine. But yeah, to have him come and like, I'm going to sit on the throne today. And when he gets there and he leans forward and his crown falls off, and then he goes to try and reach for it, and Daemon of all people picks it up and puts it back on his head. Like, oh my God, what a moment. Like, such good, like, emotional, evocative TV. So good. And yeah, and then he's like, listen, we talked about this before. I told you what I wanted. This is what's happening. It's over with. So a big blow to the Hightowers. And, and then of course, ending with Daemon getting his head chopped off. And what amazing scene. Like, everything about that was so good. And then that leads to them. They're all going to dine together. Everybody, like, let's bury the hatchet. Let's have a meal together. And it looks like it's kind of almost working a little bit, right? Like, Rhaenyra, he gives his speech where he's like, listen, I'm about to die. All I've ever wanted is for all of us to get along and be a family. The legacy matters to me. Can you please, once and for all, bury the hatchet? And Rhaenyra once again stands up, and this time from a position of strength, not weakness, and says, it makes a nice compliment to Alicent and sort of says, hey, we're here, like, let's bury the hatchet. And it seems like it's turning until we end up with, this very sort of interesting scene where just as Viserys takes his leave, the serving people come in with this roast pig and they drop it on the table right in front of Aemond. And of course, Aemond was embarrassed in a couple episodes back when he was still a small child, and they brought the pig out of the dragon pit and said, it's the pink dread. And of course, Lucerys notices this from across the table and smiles. And that's what prompts Aemond to make this nasty speech where he talks about how much he loves his strong nephews, of course, emphasizing the strong so that they know that he's essentially calling them bastards once again. And and then it nearly comes to blows again. Jacaerys stands up and has a dance with his aunt, who is married to his uncle. and that makes the uncle mad, and he's making all kinds of inappropriate comments about, having sex with their cousins to whom they are now betrothed. This whole show is really messed up sometimes. And it seems like it's going to come to blows. And so basically they clear the room, but there's this sort of hopeful moment at the end where Rhaenyra and Alicent sort of lock eyes, and she says, I have to take the kids home, but I'll come back on Dragonback, and, we'll sort of continue this conversation about trying to find a nice path forward. And of course that leads to this misunderstanding, which will inevitably lead to war. So yeah, my question, and Tim, you had sort of said, well, let's sort of look forward from here. We've got 2 episodes left this season. Mm-hmm. It looks an awful lot like, now that, Viserys, once he dies at the end of this episode, that's going to be the trigger point, right? There's gasoline everywhere. The match is Viserys dying. And now Alicent thinks that she's justified in disobeying his statements in the throne room about wanting Rhaenyra to take the throne, because she now thinks that his last wish was for Aegon to take the throne. And so she's going to want Aegon. The Hightower's going to back that. Of course, Rhaenyra is supposed to take the throne, and that would put Jace in line for the throne next. And so this is all going to just turn into a major disaster over the next couple episodes. And if I'm led to understand by reading a few different articles online, I believe the next 2 to 3 seasons of the show are going to be focused on the Dance of Dragons, which is the Civil War. So all of this season has pretty much been the preamble to what is going to be a long and extremely bloody war. What are you guys thinking about what you want to see and what we might see in the last couple episodes?
Yeah, I never know what I'm going to see in this J.R.R. Martin world, or George Martin world. But Jaime and I were talking before you joined us this evening about the titles of the next 2 episodes are very sort of spoilerific, right? The next episode is called The Green Council, which we know will be Alicent's, sort of turn. And then the 10th episode is called The Black Queen, so we know we kind of can figure out what happened to Viserys in the next 2 episodes, right? So and obviously the term The Black Queen doesn't sound very particularly good, right? So I mean, from that point of view, so it's definitely the 2 women are going to be taking over their places. Their places are going to be set, right? But yeah, I mean, it's clear that the family's going to fall apart as soon as Viserys is away, and Otto kind of called it, 3 episodes ago when he said, no one's going to. I mean, a large majority of people are not going to back Rhaenyra's claim, right, to the throne.
Well, and especially if the Queen Regent is the one leading the way, like it's going to get. Yeah, it's going to get really messy very fast, right?
Who has the bigger dragon and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's interesting. So the younger son, Rhaenyra's younger son, who in theory is Laenor's son, right? That's why he would get Driftmark, because the other one's already he's already in line to get the throne, right? After Rhaenyra. Yeah. That's
right. So his second son, he would become Lord of Driftmark. Yeah. It's worth mentioning, you mentioned the Black Queen. So the 2 sides of this impending civil war will henceforth be known as Team Green and Team Black. Black for the Targaryen flags, and green, of course, for the Hightowers. So when they say the Black Queen, that could definitely be an allusion to Rhaenyra, because she would be the queen of the black side.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of let the cat out of the bag in terms of if you go and read those 2 titles for the shows, right? So,
it's funny because obviously this is another George R.R. Martin piece of work that is based on a previously written work. Thankfully, it's a completed one, but there is obviously a text that you can get information from that exists, although it's not nearly as fleshed out as the show. But it really doesn't matter, does it? Like, seeing it, experiencing it, the nuance, the performances, the quality of the production, like they hit these shows out of the park. They really do. I wasn't loving some of the time jumpy stuff this season,
because, it's hard to feel connected to these characters when they're changing so much and we're jumping from place to place and time to time. I did have some quibbles with that, and I know that I'm not alone in that feeling, but it's just such high quality programming. The performances are so good. The costumes, the settings, all of it is just so well done that you just still get sucked in. I honestly didn't think I was going to get sucked into the show as much as I have. I really didn't think, especially after I think a lot of us sort of had a bit of a sour taste for the last season of Game of Thrones. They made some choices that not everybody loved. I really didn't know if I was going to fall for it again, but I have. Yeah, man, it's so good.
It's one of the good shows out there. Mm-hmm. I have a question though. So the character played by Sonia Mizuno, Misiria, which is the ex, of Damon's, right? She was in this episode for a bit too. What do you think that's about? Or do you know?
So I think obviously she was basically getting her information in this episode from the woman who works inside of the Red Keep for Alicent. So she was there. So that's one of the little subplots that we didn't really talk about. So there's definitely reasons to be empathetic to both sides of this, Team Green and Team Black. But they've done a much better job of, putting less on Team Black. So the awful thing that theoretically Team Black did was Rhaenyra had a sex life. It's so much more pale compared to what we saw in this episode, which is that we knew that that Aegon was a brat from previous episodes. Here we learn he's a rapist. He clearly sexually assaulted this young woman who we meet in this episode. And Alicent, the queen of hypocrisy, who was like, oh, I can't believe Rhaenyra would act this way. And oh, she had to drink moon tea so she didn't get pregnant. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Basically forces this young woman to drink the same tea to avoid the scandal of possibly, carrying a bastard child of her son. And to her credit, she goes downstairs and slaps him and says, you are no son of mine. And I can't believe you acted like this. Now, this is the same person who, this next episode she's going to try and put him on the throne. But he's a monster. He's a monstrous person. And we know that, he's a rapist and his brother is a thief because he stole that dragon during the funeral. They really are extremely unlikable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually slightly confused as to whether it was the sort of abortive tea or if it was like a poison, because they don't really show what happens at that point. And later on, there's somebody like, hey, where's that lady? And I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, where is that lady? Is she puking her guts out on a toilet somewhere, or is she dead? Because they made it a little ambiguous here for me.
Yeah. I think we're supposed to get that it's the same moon tea, which is the tea that it came up in Game of Thrones. It's come up in here before, but the idea is that it's abortive tea, right? It forces you to miscarry if you are pregnant. To answer your question, I guess in a roundabout way, Tim, I guess what I'm saying is that woman was present when this was happening. She then goes to this woman who is basically the master of whispers, right? She's the one who knows things and peddles an information. So she's clearly bringing the information. Hey, Aegon raped somebody else. Here's what's going on inside the castle, and sharing that information. What I guess the larger question is what happens with that information now? Where does it go from here? How is it weaponized? Is it, Aegon's done this before. He has a series of, bastard children, or he has, a series of rape offenses that have been covered up by this queen who, in this episode, we really see there's a great line from Daemon where he's like, what's with all the religious, you basically wiped out all the heraldry of the Targaryens and replaced it all with this pious seven-pointed star, all the symbols of religion and faith. She's basically, turned what was a kind of hedonistic place into a much more puritanical space, which again is part of the whole, push-pull of the blacks versus the greens. But I wonder if this is going to be used later on to talk about the queen that is Alicent, her hypocrisy or Aegon's crimes, or how that's going to come back around. There must be something more there, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying Andor, and we'll talk about Lord of the Rings in a minute. but this is the best TV show on TV. It is. It just is. It's so good.
I'm with all the Team Black, Team Green stuff. I'm a little shocked that there's not like, I don't know, a Taco Bell or Burger King combo that you can buy that signifies your allegiance. Just like people have said, it's very similar to Team Edward, Team Jacob for the Twilight series. So it's not that dissimilar. There's a lot of similarities here. People choosing sides.
What color sauce do you want on your taco? I'm Team Green. And it's a weird thing too, because by the time you get to the end of this episode, they've done enough to make you feel, if not supportive, then at least empathetic to Alicent. You know, yes, she's made some horrible choices. No, she's not thoroughly likable, but she's kind of, you know, she was a pawn for her father in this larger game, and she's kind of trying to make the best of it. She is obviously very disappointed in the way that her sons act, and, you know, she does aspire to goodness and trying to be a better person. So they've made it complex, but the idea that in the end, what's going to be the spark, obviously, is not just Viserys' death, but this misunderstanding of the prophecy. The idea that she thinks she's doing what mattered most to her husband, carrying out his final wishes, especially right on the heel of that happening in the throne room, right? That's what Rhaena comes up and says is, as far as I know, my husband, who's on his deathbed, wanted, you know, Lucerys to be the new king of the tides, or, you know, Lord of the Tides. It's heartbreaking in its way, right? It really is. Like, so these families are going to destroy each other. They're going to destroy their legacy. They're going to tear these buildings down to their foundations over what works out to be an old man on his deathbed saying the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time. It's awful. It's really awful.
Good show. Couple episodes left, right? 10 in the season. So we'll see where they leave us. They've given us a whole bunch here.
Yeah, that's all a surprise.
Yeah, I wonder if we're gonna, you know, the one thing I have been noticing is, especially over the last few episodes, the cast count is getting very high. There's a lot of kids, cousins, yada yada yada. Like, there's a lot of players, and their names are all really alike, which is annoying. But I wonder if one of these episodes, whether it's the next one or the final one, we'll see some players taken off the board if the stakes go up, if it does actually start to be more of a war and less of a Cold War, which is what it's been, right?
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, we can talk about the season finale of Rings of Power. Season finale.
Well, yeah, 2 episodes, I guess, to cover quickly. We didn't really talk about the last but one episode, which was the sort of fallout of the Mount Doom going off. That one was, again, a lot of table setting, right? It was basically like, you know, everybody going off in their different directions. But it sets up this big finale, which we finally get some clarity. That's really what the bottom line on this one was. True identities are finally revealed in an epic season 1 finale. Mm-hmm.
So we have Lord of Tides, and then we have... No, sorry, is that right? Yeah, Lord of Tides, and then the Eye. What are your pitches for that?
No, it was the Eye was the second last one. The final one is Alloyed, which is funny because obviously it's a play on Allied and Alloyed. All
right. So what's your pitches?
For episode 7, it was everyone deals with the aftermath of the volcano. Durin and Elrond play Minecraft, and Before Door No More for mine. and this episode 8 pitch was very straightforward. Gandalf and Sauron revealed in the season finale. Although there are people who will disagree with those a bit.
There you go. I got some rebuttals for those ones.
So sticking with episode 7, just to give it briefly, I didn't really have anything in Easter egg hunt. The pew 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 was really more around the burning horse and ruins that were pretty striking. Yeah. My quote from that episode was the Harfoots talking about the trees and stuff, and it's like, trees don't talk. It's like, well, some do. It's like, oh, that's practically an Easter egg right there, as a hint toward the Ents, as a rumor of a whisper that, like, there are some trees that talk.
Yeah, that's what I actually had as my Easter egg for that episode was that exact quote, because, yeah, obviously you're talking about the Ents, which, you know, anybody who's seen those movies knows about, or heaven forbid, read the books.
My big question from that episode 7 was, when exactly did the dwarves dig too greedily and too deep? Because right now, dug enough to at least mildly annoy the Balrog with that leaf that fell all the way down. It's like, did he just go snooze for a little bit more? It's like, yeah, whatever, just go back to sleep. Like, when do they cause their doom there? Because that was an interesting sort of reveal there for longtime fans of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how much, they are condensing storylines or condensing timelines on some of this stuff because they have to. Obviously, it just doesn't do anybody good to be like, well, all these humans that were in the first couple episodes, they're all dead now because the elves lived like thousands of years. So they're condensing some of this stuff, which is logical. But I wonder how much of those kind of seminal important parts we will get over the course of this series.
Yeah. Was there other stuff that either of you picked up from episode 7 before we would move on to 8?
Yeah, the only other one that my big question from this one was these 3 women who have just been, scaring the pants off of the Harfoots and everything. Who are they? What do they want? Now, obviously, by the time we get to episode 8, we do find out who they are and what they want. But at that point, that was really the question was, who are these people? They're clearly not there for good reasons if they're burning down the Harfoots camp. But yeah, that was the big what the out of that for me was, what exactly is it that they're doing other than torturing little people?
Well, we do sort of find out in the next episode, though, right?
Yes, we do. So yeah, the episode 8 was really it was good, although they tried, we obviously we had a little sort of mid-season, we had a good discussion about, the candidates, the Sauron candidates, right? Like, they were trying to sort of put a few people forward. They were trying to put forward Adar. They were trying to put forward the Stranger, who's with the Harfoots, and they were trying to put forward some hints that it was also Halbrand. And there was reasons why you could think it was any of them. The Stranger obviously kept losing control and calling on these very powerful forces and putting the Harfoots in danger. Adar, of course, this menacing presence threatening the Southlanders and trying to bring about the creation of Mordor. So again, big candidate there. But they kept dropping all these hints through the season about Halbrand. But he dropped a couple of lines that were red flags about power over flesh and a few different sort of cryptic comments that sort of raised the flag. And the bottom line was that they introduced very early in the concept that he's a smith and that he has this expertise in that he's sort of woven into the season. And also we've seen him fight, and he was kind of a monster when he got into that fight. He was like smashing people's faces into the wall and stuff. Like he's not a rogue. He's kind of a killer. So they definitely set the stage for, well, it could go all these different ways. By the time we get through episode 7, we can pretty much take Adar off the board because he clearly is a dark elf, and we know that Sauron isn't a dark elf, that he was a man. And we also know that Adar has essentially done what he said he wanted to do, which is to create this homeland for the Uruk. So in this one, it really comes down to, is it the Stranger? Who is the Stranger and who is Halbrand? And so that's sort of the thread we follow with this whole episode is, all these little sort of, oh, is it this? Is it that? As it goes back and forth. And we finally get the truth. And the truth is, and if you haven't watched this, I don't know why you're listening to this podcast right now, but we over the course of the episode, we get the sort of, I wrote down in my notes, you'll see them on in our notes in here, but they start in the Greenwood, the Stranger is there, and then he loses his apple and he thinks he sees Nori and he chases her. And it turns out that it's one of the 3 women that have been sort of following them. And they all sort of bow and say, oh, we're here to serve you, Lord Sauron. And I wrote in brackets, there's just no way. Like, there's no way that this guy is Sauron after all these hints and tips. And as we go through the episode, Galadriel and Halbrand go to see the elves in Eregion. And of course, that's where Celebrimbor is. That's where Elrond is. That's where the king is, Gil-galad. And they go there and they, coincidentally, Halbrand's got a great possible solution for how they can, use the mithril and everything else. And of course, in doing this and suddenly being like, going from like on his deathbed to like, I'm fine. And let's talk about how we can change, have power over flesh again. They build up this suspicion in Galadriel, which of course pays off with the two of them finally having this sort of conflict down by the river, and in which he reveals the fact that he is Sauron. And but then it's so weirdly done too, because of course Galadriel's like checking up on him, and then she figures out that it's him, and they have this sort of like psychic battle inside of her head, and then she comes back around and basically like says where's Halbrand? They're like, well, he's gone. And she's like, okay, well, don't let that guy back in here, but doesn't say, yeah, that was Sauron. Maybe like somebody grab a sword and let's go find that guy.
Yeah, it's not until Elrond discovers the parchment that she's reading to show that there is no King of the Southlands, right? But the other thing too is I kind of always thought the stranger was probably Gandalf, because I remember Gandalf talking about how he always did like a Doctor Who thing where he would what do you call it? He would regenerate into, like, he starts off as he's Gandalf the Grey in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and then he becomes Gandalf the White, right?
But that's also because Saruman becomes grey because he is dabbling in the dark magic too.
But also, is it Saruman? Who's the one that Christopher Lee plays?
That's Saruman,
or it could have been him. It could have been that character. But it's like it definitely a wizard, and the fact that he's got powers, and because he can burn the forest, and he dispatches the three ladies, right? Yeah. Turns them into butterflies, which will make Nanthika really happy, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I had that for my best pew pew pew, is when the character that we're going to call Gandalf, and I'll make my case for him really being Gandalf in a second, but that fight between him and the trio with some help from the Harfoots was a great scene where again he's starting to figure it out. I love how he just like suddenly mastered English too. That was really impressive. But that scene was really good and sort of plays out, and of course has the sort of quote where they're talking about only you can show who you are, you choose by what you do, and he says, I am good. And of course that's the clincher that he is not Sauron, right? But the case for this really being Gandalf comes at the end of the episode, where when Nori makes the decision that she's going to accompany the stranger, as we're still calling him, on his adventure, doesn't want to leave him alone. She leaves the Harfoot clan and decides to go off with him. He says, she says, where are we going? And he says, I honestly don't know. And then he turns around and he takes a sniff and he says, oh, it's that way. And she says, how do you know? And he says, if in doubt, you always follow your nose. That's exactly what Gandalf says in the Mines of Moria. To the word, that's the same thing he says. So it's Gandalf.
Yeah, that was an interesting sequence where we have to remember that these shows have to appeal to more than just people who are really into the Lord of the Rings. And so, which dude is Sauron, which, who are these other guys? I can see where it's not meant to fool people who are like really deeply into the lore. And I think we were pretty spot on. Like, this dude's probably Gandalf. This dude over here is probably Sauron. But that would probably be pretty actually shocking for sort of more casual viewers. I don't really have a problem with that. I did for a moment think they might go the route of maybe it's like splitting up of Sauron, that like part of it is the body and part of it is kind of like the soul, because they show Sauron is like he's considerably bigger, and the stranger is considerably bigger, even if you account for Hobbit smallness. He still seems pretty large for a person, so they didn't go that way, but I did think maybe they might.
Get this man a writing job. That's good. I like that. That would have been really interesting.
People were wondering on the internet, like, why doesn't Galadriel say something? And I'm like, well, if you remember, they kind of thought she was sort of nuts at the very beginning of this series. So she was already like, oh, Sauron's here. And they're like, yeah, whatever, loser, just get on the boat and go enjoy your paradise. Get out of here. So if she started saying like, hey, we should go stab this guy because he's 100% Sauron. I didn't know, but I accidentally brought him here and we started making him do stuff. they would have thrown her in the loony bin for sure, right? So I can understand where people might have some issues with the way it was handled, but like I can see why she wouldn't immediately tell everybody that like this guy is the one person I've been looking for this entire time.
Yeah, and it is interesting too because again, she directly lifts some of the stuff from the book about when she's having this sort of mental battle with Sauron, and he says together we can save Middle Earth, and she says save or rule, and then she sort of quotes that same line. So in the scene where Frodo offers her the One Ring in Fellowship of the Ring, and she sort of says, I would become a dark queen, and I would rule, and, in my dark glory and stuff like that. That's the exact same line she uses here too. And so again, we get that callback to, she also feels that temptation, that power, that sort of, it's in her too, right? So I think you're right, Jaime. I think she's sort of covering herself, but also, thinking like, I don't want to get thrown back into a boat and told to go jump in, and if I tell everybody that I came all the way back and also I brought like the nefarious monster that we've all been hunting back with me, that she would instantly get spurned and she wouldn't be able to actually make things right.
Yeah, and she did fall into that area that I was wondering about of like, did she cause the thing to happen that she was trying to prevent from happening? And she did, right? Had she just gotten on the boat and sipped some Mai Tais in paradise, odds are pretty good Sauron is still floating in the ocean, maybe eaten by the big whale monster. And even if he can't die, he's just sitting at the bottom of the ocean, just doing nothing but in the gut, like he's Jonah and the whale, right? So that sort of fits. For me, when I look at this series, I'm like, I feel like it could have been 6 episodes. There's some pacing issues where I feel like the second half of the season was way better than the first. And there's good things in the first half, but it feels like they needed to change the timing, the pacing, or even just trim some episodes, because I was glad that the Harfoot stuff actually went somewhere. Like it didn't go anywhere for a very long time. And I am glad they made something useful out of it. I'm happy that they had some real change for some people there. I'm sorry to see Sadek die, but he didn't go out like a punk. He got stabbed and he still participated in the battle. So I enjoyed that.
Yep.
And we do have the rings, the eponymous rings of power, right? We got the first of them created there. So that's nice.
It's a strange thing though, because they, again, I'm not a Tolkienologist by any means. I've read the books. I enjoyed the books. I've seen the movies, of course. I wouldn't consider myself an acolyte. Like so many people know so much more about this stuff, but it seemed like it came sideways too. Like theoretically, Sauron helps Celebrimbor figure out how to use this small amount of mithril to create the 3 rings of power that are worn by the elves. But it's not like he created them, which is kind of how the lore has always been. That Sauron creates the 3 rings for the elves, the 7 rings for men, the 5 for the dwarf lords, and then 1 ring to rule them all. It just seems strange that really he kind of laid the formula for it, but Celebrimbor is the one who makes the rings, and they make the conscious decision. There can't be 1, there can't be 2, there must be 3. So it's I don't know. To me, it just seemed a little bit mildly incongruous with what we know about the lore.
True. And they also, like, the other thing that kind of perturbed me was, this is a continuity thing, is she sacrifices the dagger to make 3 tiny rings. Where does the rest of the super valuable gold and silver go?
They make her a nice anklet.
A nice what?
No, I don't know. A nice ankle bracelet. I don't know. The whole episode was very, I must admit, like for a series that has been very deliberate in not tipping its hand, this episode was a little bit overt in some of the dialogue. Again, I grabbed some quotes, but when early in the episode, Celebrimbor is saying, a circular form would be ideal, allowing the mithril light to arc back upon itself in one unbroken round. I was like, oh, you mean like a ring? Like it was,
like a very small crown.
Well, that's it. They were talking about making a crown, and a crown would be perfect. I'm like, oh, I wonder if it's going to be a ring in the end. Like some of that stuff was a little like, it's all kind of on the nose.
Well, especially since it's called the Rings of Power,
Well, that's it, right? And again, it's based on a series called The Lord of the Rings. Like, gee, I wonder how this is going to play out. No, it was, this one was satisfying in its way because it certainly was, there was a lot of, a lot of build up. It did occur to me, I think we talked about it a little bit, but we didn't really, because we didn't talk about episode 7, because we were covering 2 at once here, but there's a weird intimation in last week's episode where they find Halbrand on the side of the road with a stab wound, but no one saw him in the battle and no one saw him get hurt. So did he stab himself?
Yeah, to like ingratiate himself so he could get the elf magic
to get to there. Yeah. Which again, I mean, Sauron's supposed to be like pure evil, so sure. But yeah, interesting.
Or was it ketchup?
Well, I mean, they do say it's a sour wound at one point, and so he's apparently he's committed to the bit. He was like, I'm going to stab myself really good here, and then they'll have to take me to Eregion so I can get healed and trick these guys into making me some rings.
So Elrond at one point says he's half elf. Did you catch that?
Yeah, he says that in a previous episode too, when he's talking to when he's begging to the dwarves to help save his people. He makes a point of saying, "I'm only half."
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's Elrond, half elf.
Cool. All right, should we move to our watch list now?
Yeah.
So what you got there, Jaime?
Believe it or not, both of my
Again,
videos,
not appropriate for this show, but that's beside the
point. they're pushing it. So there's a I'm not sure. It's at least PG, possibly PG-13 warning for both of these, even the animated ones. So these are, believe it or not, both Lord of the Rings ones. I'll start with a much more straightforward one, which is the Ultimate Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Rings recap cartoon. It's done in a, I don't know, like a Fritz the Cat kind of vague style. It's very irreverent. It's very, what is it? In 2 minutes and 50 seconds, can you recap, a whole book or about 3 hours movie? And they do a pretty good job. There is a lot of profane moments, so use that as your guidance. But I thought it was cute. I see that it came out in 2020. I'm like very disappointed that I couldn't find anything for The Two Towers or for Return of the King. But well done there. So if you're wondering where all of this is going eventually for Rings of Power, eventually it reaches to this point of the story. The other one that shocked me, and I'm guessing the YouTube algorithm brought this up for me because it said, hey, you're watching a lot of Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings stuff, I don't know if I want to spoil it or not, or if we want to describe it for those of you who are too young to watch the video. What do you gentlemen think, having seen this video? It's only 40 seconds.
Oh, the in the mood one?
When she's in the mood, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
I'll do my best to describe it. It's a raunchy one where, there's two, I don't know, teenagers, college-age people. I don't know what age they're supposed to be, youngins. And they're bored and idle hands are the devil's playground is what they say. She's, like, hey, why don't you get your pants off there? And he's like, what? Yeah, go for it. And he's like, all right, sure. And he's like, what? It's glowing blue. But it only glows blue when there's orcs around. There's a crazy turn to feel meat's on the menu, boys. It's very, it's very immature and mature at the same time. I could not believe it. It was the weirdest crossover that I'd never expected.
Yeah. If you're over the age of 18, enjoy.
Right.
So did you talk about the Ultimate Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, it's, I thought it was going to be a little family friendlier, but I'm like, no, this is more like heavy metal or...
It's sort of Ren and Stimpy is how I kind of read it. Like, it's almost like Ren and Stimpy style.
Fritz the Cat. It's not one that I would show the 5-year-olds, that's for sure. It's got a little too much there.
So what was interesting about that was the algorithm after I watched that one brought up the Ultimate Star Wars, which is the same, like A New Hope told in the same style, right? The Lord of the Rings one didn't kind of do the whole rings. It was almost like the Ralph Bakshi, first movie kind of story, right? But the Ultimate Recap does the whole, right up to the medal ceremony. And it's just as funny. It's kind of it's basically telling the story of A New Hope without all the sort of ridiculous details in between, right? So, and some of the the family getting scorched, and then later on when and you see the characters sort of toasted, and then when the Millennium Falcon takes off from Tatooine, the stormtroopers that are chasing are the same depiction as the torched family, right? So it's pretty funny, how to tell Star Wars without telling Star Wars. It's pretty cool. What do you got for a pick, John?
Yeah, I wanted to check with you guys. Did you guys have a chance to watch Werewolf by Night?
I did not. I was hoping that maybe you did and could give us the heads up.
Yeah, so I was sitting there the other night and I had some time, and I was sitting there with our number one fan, and I thought, you know what, as I mentioned previously in the show, I was not enthralled particularly with the idea of, Marvel horror has never really been my thing. I'm not a horror buff. I certainly have a respect for it as a genre, but it's not my cup of tea. I wasn't sure what to expect from it, but I thought, you know what, I've got the time. It's 55 minutes, and it's sort of treated as a special. But it is set in the MCU. This is an MCU story, and I thought, well, let's see where they go with this. And it's an interesting. It was far more enjoyable than I think I was going in expecting. I didn't have high hopes, so obviously it's easy to clear that bar. But even that being said, it was enjoyable. The whole thing is done very much like a 1930s horror movie. It's in black and white. It is. As Tim, you mentioned earlier when talking about the lower decks, it's got the cigarette marks, it's got the grain. It looks like it's supposed to be set in the distant past, but it is set in now. And the big sort of elevator pitch for it is a group of monster hunters get together to enter a contest where they hope to gain the ultimate prize. And it's basically it's a self-contained little story about these monster hunters trying to catch a monster, and if they catch this monster, they get this ultimate prize. There is appearances by not just the title character Werewolf by Night, who of course has existed in the comic books for 5 decades. There is other Easter eggs and appearances and things for people who are fans of Marvel comics and Marvel horror particularly. I wouldn't say it's horrific, but there's definitely some over the top violence, but it's all done in black and white, so it's not as gory as it certainly would have been if it was presented earnestly. And it is it's kind of got I wouldn't say it's tongue-in-cheek. It's not like She-Hulk overtly funny, but there's certainly a little bit of a wink and a nod in some of it to, just the absurdity sometimes of the characters in horror movies and stuff like that. It is certainly worth a watch, is the bottom line on it. It's certainly worth a watch for people who are enjoying Marvel content. We joke all the time that, they could turn a pile of cow droppings into gold. This is not gold, but it shines pretty good. And, I'll be really curious to see if any of the characters from this continue on. Obviously, they've introduced a character like Moon Knight that is more sort of supernatural, occultish. There's talk that they're going, obviously Blade is a character that we're going to get. There's talk about reviving Ghost Rider. There is this sort of darker, black magic-y kind of side to the MCU that we haven't really gotten into. I'll be really curious to see if they build towards, some of the more established, crossovers, team ups kind of stuff with some of these characters going forward, because there's no shortage of it. And there are certainly lots of people who do like their horror, and especially if it's not over the top. I have definitely friends who are horror aficionados, genuine, like people who are way invested in it, who would scoff at this sort of type of horror, but it's definitely for a mass audience. It's horror and good horror at that. So yeah, I would say make the time. It's less than an hour. It's well done. There's some good performances. And yeah, it's Marvel and they do a good job.
So this is a Marvel piece. I didn't realize that. I just thought it was
it's
for Halloween.
It's set in the MCU. It features characters, long existing characters from the Marvel comics, and quite possibly ones we might see again someday.
Cool. And I think for the kids, we should probably explain what the comment about the cigarette burns is. That back in the analog days, before DVDs and Blu-rays and even cassette techs and stuff, movies used to arrive at the movie theater in reels, and you would, depending on the length of the film, you might have 3 or 4 reels to make up a full 90-minute or 2-hour long movie. And how they would the projectionist would load up the film onto one projection camera or projector, and then they would put a second roll onto the second one. So they would have reel number 1, and just as reel number 1 is running out, there would be a cigarette burn, like literally burned into the film, that would appear, and it would let the projectionist know when to start the other camera or the other projector, so that it was a seamless transition between the first reel and the second reel. And one thing they would do at that time too was that the director would change the lighting between one, so it wasn't jarring to the audience. Like they would go from like an indoor scene to an outdoor scene, for example, when a cigarette burn appeared. So that so it would have sort of a continuity, and you would never know that, or you wouldn't notice that the film had changed reels or changed projectors, right? So it's kind of a trick that they used to do, and they used to like basically was a way of marking the film so that like I said, the projectionist would know when to start the second projector.
I just had to have the same conversation with our number one fan when we watched this the other day. Yeah, yep. That's where we're here. We're a public service podcast.
You can also learn the same thing if you watch Fight Club. But we can't talk.
That's
about
true.
We can't talk about that though.
We can't talk about Fight Club,
right?
Then the last thing I had on here, I'll we'll obviously get into spoiler country, but Tim and I, along with some of our family, went to go see the Clerks. Was it Convenience Tour?
Yeah, Convenience Tour. Yeah,
where Kevin Smith was bringing out the new film Clerks 3 this week, and so he comes out, introduces the movie, shows the movie, and then does a Q&A afterwards where people can ask questions and hear what he has to say about his new project. It was I'm still wrestling with how I feel about this movie. I don't know, Tim. I'll be really curious to hear what you think of it too, but I'm still struggling with trying to process my feelings about it. It's certainly it's not my favorite of Kevin's movies at all.
Yeah.
There are certainly, Kevin is a complicated person, and his films are, reflection of that. He certainly has, he wears his emotions on his sleeve. He has a lot of things that he wants to say. This movie is at times laugh out loud funny, and there are parts where you, if you were not careful, might find a tear coming to your eye. And I guess that's what, as, he sort of pointed out in the Q&A, that, he kind of has had a career that isn't exactly what he anticipated. He saw himself initially as being an auteur and wanting to do, films, not movies. And then he made some choices along the way that sort of led him to doing things that were a little more mass populist, a little more, broad. And with this movie, he wanted to try and go back to doing something that was, poignant and had something to say. And it does. And it's effective in that way. But I think that's why I'm still not sure how I feel about it, because it certainly raised a lot of complex feelings for me, which I guess as an artist, Tim, I mean, you can certainly share some perspective on this. That's what you're trying to do as an artist, is to try and provoke feeling, and you're trying to make those connections with your audience. But it was an unusual ride to go on, and I'm still thinking about it days later. What did you think of it?
Well, I sort of had those feelings during the actual watching of the film, because there's parts of it that admittedly are a bit slow, right? And awkwardly slow, right? Like there's a definite message. I mean, it is a bit preachy in sort of halfway through, or maybe a third of the way through, but and I get where he's coming from, and he did explain sort of the reasons behind that in the the after show. I found it very fan servicey, right? Like if you're a huge Clerks fan, and there's a lot of us who are into the first movie. In fact, they even asked before the film started, "Are you a Clerks 1 fan, or you're a Clerks 2 fan?" Because some people never came to Clerks until the second movie. And then are you a Jay and Silent Bob fan kind of thing? And so, and people sort of, and it's funny that the cheering of the crowd, it actually got louder during the not the first movie, because the first movie is very, I mean, it's very well written. It's very well, like, the story's great, but it looks like a university student film, like from a quality point of view. It's like almost 16 millimeter, I think, right? So it is pretty low grade, and crude in times, right? And so the story kind of builds on the relationship of the two protagonists from the first movie, right? They appear in the second movie as well, and they're kind of had this 40 year long, is it 40 years, I think, right? Relation.
Well, 30 theoretically. 30 years from now.
Yeah, and it's they're sort of they're bros. I mean, like, they've worked together. They've had very similar lives, and they both have sort of a midlife crisis. And of course, one of the crises is actually in the trailer. So if you've seen the trailer, you know that one of the characters is going to have a life altering event happen, which will make him reconsider what he's doing, and then how they deal with that, and this is also based on Kevin's life. I mean, the fact that he did have, everybody knows he had, or most people know he had a heart attack, and he was saved by his doctor, and the type of heart attack he had was a particularly dangerous one, and he was lucky to get out of it. Most people don't, right? I think he said it was like 20%, right? 20% survive, and actually
20% chance of survival.
Yeah, and even in the after show, he said he had a discussion with a doctor after he made this movie, and it was even less than that, right? Like the percentage of people who survive. But so I mean, there's obviously some messages for people who are of the Randall and Dante's, or Randy and Dan T. Their ages, right? And I mean, there's some hilarious bits in there. Like it's basically about making a movie. It's about, and it goes through the sort of, like, even the audition. I love the auditions. There's a clip on Facebook you can see where they show the audition scenes, and they've got like Sarah Michelle Gellar in there. They've got Melissa Benoist. They've got
Freddie Prinze, Ben Affleck.
Yeah, Ben Affleck, and his buddy from the podcasts.
Scott Mosier.
Well, Scott Mosier, but also the other dude, the one
they've got Ralph Garman, and everybody's
the
in
one
there.
He says, "Do the Schwarzenegger," and they're all doing that. Not even supposed to be here today line, right? And the best one is I liked Bobby Moynihan auditioning for Silent Bob, but without giving away too much.
Doing it silently.
Yeah, he did Marion so and so do a porno too, right? Wasn't that his? Didn't Kevin Smith do that one?
Yeah, Zack and Mary
make a porno. Yeah, it's sort of like that scene there where they had the funny auditions, and I mean, so and it throws back to a lot of the sort of things you like in Clerks and in Clerks too, right? There's sort of tie-ins there too, and so it's an entertaining movie. But like you said, I don't know if I would put this up. Like, Clerks is a unique piece of film. It's a film. Like, I don't really think of it as a movie. I think of it as an independent, film.
Yep.
Clerks 2, Mallrats is very much a commercial piece. Chasing Amy is probably arguably one of his better movies, if not the best, right?
Yeah, and I would say that's more of a film as well.
Yeah, that's more of a film. That's because it has some definite things. And then Jay and Silent Bob are kind of like vehicles for those two characters. In fact, there was even a whole animated series on Jay and Silent Bob, right? And it's kind of like it's interesting the way that kind of works. And he brings a lot of his friends back, and he brings a lot of the original cast back. It's almost like the first Star Trek movie, which suffered from the fact that it was just about bringing back the original cast, right? there are. I mean, bringing back the cast for those of them. It's dedicated to the two cast members who are no longer with us, right? But that was kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't find that the two actors who play Dante and Randall are particularly the best actors. Like. They play their characters well, but I don't know if I've ever seen them in anything else, right? Have you?
I've never seen them outside of a Kevin Smith movie. They played other parts in those movies as little like cameos and whatever. But you're right. I don't think that they are. I think they get their characters quite well. I think, having heard them both be interviewed before, I think they're both very thoughtful people, and I think they invest a lot of themselves in these characters. So I think the characters show that. But you're right. I wouldn't say that they're by any means the best actors that Kevin has worked with.
Right. I mean, so to a certain extent, this film kind of suffers from that. I mean, it's hilarious because it's filmed in the Quick Stop, and without giving away too much, right? Because the Quick Stop is a character in Kevin Smith's work as well, right? And the dude from Clerks 2, I don't know his name, but he was hilarious coming,
Elias.
Every time you see Elias, he's got a different style of dress. I mean, he starts off as a Christian, and he goes over to the dark side, and there's a time when he shows up at like Rocky from Rocky Horror, and it's just every time he comes on camera and with his sidekick, they're just it's a laugh moment, right? So.
Well, and they play the two of them as the new Jay and Silent Bob.
Yeah,
too,
pretty
right?
much. Yeah. In fact, the one guy doesn't even speak, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the actor who plays that sort of Silent Bob junior role. That's actually his daughter Harley's boyfriend, Austin.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
In real life, yeah.
Yeah, and even she's in it too, which is kind of hilarious.
Well, she comes back and plays the part that she played in the last Jay and Silent Bob movie, right? She plays Jay's daughter,
right,
at the end,
right. Yeah.
But yeah, like I say, it's an interesting movie. I noticed that it actually dropped today on the iTunes store,
digital,
so you can get the digital if you want to watch it. Or Kevin, I think he said he's still got like 20 more stops on this tour where he's taking it out and talking about it, which is always an interesting experience to hear what the filmmaker has to say about the film. I always enjoy those opportunities. It's definitely worth a watch. There's lots of good stuff there. It's definitely a thinky piece at times. Not necessarily the clearest thinky piece, but yeah, it's again certainly worth a watch, especially if you are somebody who has enjoyed Kevin's work in the past. It's not as bonkers off the rails as things like Tusk and Yoga Hosers. It's certainly more mainstream approachable. You could watch this with a lot of different types of people and find some enjoyment in it. There are moments where you'll laugh out loud, and there are moments where you might roll a tear. And as I say, that maybe as an artist, that's what he wanted, and that's why it works. Ultimately, I think for me, as he pointed out, Clerks 1 is a film. Clerks 2 is, a 3-act, well-made Hollywood-type movie with a happy ending. This movie is, elements from both, but I'm not sure that it worked as well as I was hoping it would.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I was there primarily to see him talk, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there were 2 shows in Toronto. And the thing is, he takes questions from the audience, so you never know where he's going to go, right?
Yeah.
So,
although I think he deliberately directs the comments back to where he wants the conversation to go.
Perhaps.
I've been lucky enough in my career to interview Kevin a few times and spend some time with him. He plays the fool well on stage, but he's a very shrewd and smart person. Having had a chance to sort of poke away at his brain a little bit, he's not a dummy at all. He plays the fool pretty good, but he's not a fool.
Cool. Well, I guess that's it for another week. So, hey, Jonathan, people want to get in touch with you wherever they find you.
You can always find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JPKNews.
And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you wherever they find you.
I'm on Twitter as @DevTheHair.
And as I usually say, my name is Timitra, Timmitra, and on the Twitter machine is where you'll find me. Until next time, we'll see you in the future.
Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast, or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spockcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spockcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
So I'm not going to put this in the show, but what like the Rosario Dawson character not having passed
Spoilers,
away?
Jaime. Spoilers coming. Spoilers are coming.
Was that?
Tim's going to drop spoilers on you.
What was that like? Was that like did we know that was the case,
Nope.
or were we just part of the story? Okay, all right. That's all I have to say.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I always struggle with this. You know, one of the to draw the comparison, and one that you'll definitely know, Jaime, is Aliens 3, right? So Alien 1, a classic. Alien 2 doubles down and is, in my mind, probably a better film. And they're both made by genius filmmakers, right? So we got Ridley Scott doing the first one. We got James Cameron doing the second one. The third one, you're like, well, how are they gonna top this? And then they actually have what's his name? The guy who did Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Seven and all that. What's his name? That's gonna bug me. Anyways, I'll look it up. But that guy, Fincher, David Fincher, do that. And the first thing he does in the first 10 minutes of the movie is basically undo the ending of the previous movie by, this in Aliens. And again, please, I'm not trying to spoil anything. I happen to know some people who haven't seen Alien and Aliens, but so use your discretion.
It's been many years. Come on.
It has, but then as a parent of a teenagers, anyways. So, spoiler alert, here you go. At the end of Aliens, the only people that make it out are Ripley and the little girl and parts of the robot. The first thing that happens in part 3 is it crash lands on the penal colony, right? And the little girl is dead. Like, the whole point of that movie was, get your hands off her, you whatever, and saving the little girl who was the last survivor of this colony, and Ripley saves her, and then the first thing they do in the third movie is kill off this little girl and and sort of change the trajectory of that movie in your mind forever, because what you want to remember is, Ripley fought hard. She gets that big, what's it called, load lifter suit, and has the big fight with the alien queen and throws her out the airlock, and it's this great scene. And, and then she and the little girl survive, and you're like, cool. And then that's immediately undone by the next movie. That's kind of how I felt about this one was, after sort of, years of tumult and, things not going right. And we see sort of, the characters sort of vacillating between happiness and sadness. Clerks 2 kind of ends on a happy note and ends with these characters sort of hopefully with a bright future ahead of them. And then in this one, it sort of starts with, oh, by the way, remember how that one ended? We've decided to undo a bunch of these parts from that movie. And I found myself being like, that's a huge bummer. And it sat on me for the whole movie.
Interesting. That's an interesting analogy to make there.
Did you, obviously you're a little bit younger than us, Jaime. Did you have any of those feelings? I mean, for me, watching Aliens was like a go see it in the movie theater movie. And then so was part 3. So there was time in between, but it's still kind of stuck in my craw of oh, that's weird that the first thing you do in the first scene of the third movie is undo what happened in the second movie. Do you ever remember having any complex feelings of oh, that's kind of a weird thing to do after making such a big deal of saving this one character to kill that character?
I do remember going to Alien 3 with my cousin, and I think we did talk about that. I was like, oh, that's messed up that these guys didn't make it from the other movie. It's like, because we had probably not processed it as a, like a dishonor to the characters sort of a thing. Nothing so complex, but more like, oh, I thought Hicks was going to do something cool this time too, because like, he and Ripley know what's going on. They can tag team this thing going forward, right? We were looking at it more disappointment than it was a film criticism sort of angle.
Yeah. Like I say, it for me, that's sort of where this movie begins. Is it sort of starts by, like, in the first couple of minutes, it sort of undoes some of the stuff that was sort of the conclusionary notes of the last one, and you're like, wait, what? And it just sort of sets you back on your heels. And I'm sure that's artistic intent, but it also sort of disrupted my good feelings about the experience in a way that I'm still sort of trying to process.
Interesting.
I like.
I don't know.
I like the story he told about James Cameron with the movie studio when he wanted to make Alien.
Oh, that was funny. Yeah.
He says he walked up to the screen and he wrote on the wall Alien, and then he put an S, and then he drew 2 lines through the S to turn it into a dollar sign. And the producers went, "Oh, we get it."
Take this concept, make a second one with more aliens, make bags full of money. Well done.
Yes, definitely. Cool. All right.
So now that we've with our 1 day delay, we've knocked Lord of the Rings off the board, we've knocked She-Hulk off the board. So next week we're down to then there were 3, and we're closing down on a couple of these things. We've only got 2 episodes left of House of the Dragon and 2 episodes left of Lower Decks.
And then what happens after that?
Well, we still got Andor for a while, and Prodigy comes back at the end of this month. So we segue from we end Lower Decks and then pick up Prodigy the following week. No, or is it the following week, or is it the same day? I think it might be the same day. They overlap.
Is it the 27th? Yeah, that's a Thursday. Yeah. So it looks like it would overlap.
Yeah, because next week is the second last episode. The final episode on the 27th, and the 27th is when we get the first episode of Prodigy. So we'll have one double up Star Trek week. And so that series carries us through October, November into December. And then from there we pick up with, is it Disco first? Disco then Picard, or Picard then Disco? I can't remember the release date. But we're back on the season run. And then I imagine it'll probably be into Strange New Worlds after that. So we'll probably have a good run. We might have a little bit of a break in there for a bit, but I think it's pretty much a straight run with Star Trek stuff until spring.
Really? Okay.
You love it. You know you love it.
Yeah, says the person who has to edit the show. I love it.
I was going to say, tune in next week, the return of the Canadian Health Information Podcast next week. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. Good first episode. We're talking about the healthcare workforce shortages in Canada. That's a sizzling topic. I got some bad news for you. Not looking good. The amount of healthcare workers compared to the amount of people who are your age and older who are going to need their services.
What are you going to do?
Die in a hallway waiting for service. That would be my guess.
Yeah. Well, just don't take me to the hospital.
Cool. Home surgery kit. Here we go.
Yeah. K-tail home surgery.
You know, I'm not suggesting anything might unfortunately happen to you, but maybe think about getting one of those house defibrillators. Just saying. Or just keep a plug with like something you don't like attached to it. You can just pull the leads out and just.
Anyway, on that happy note, I gotta go. So,
okay.
Talk to you guys next time.
Till next time.
All right.
Bye.
Take care, guys.